Millions of years ago, a meteorite hit the Earth, destroying the world and freezing all living things. It was believed that all forests on Earth had perished, but 200 million years later, workers in a mine in Colorado, USA, unexpectedly discovered a giant amber. Inside the amber were the frozen corpses of a primitive man and a Tyrannosaurus rex. Even more astonishing was that the primitive man from 200 million years ago was hunting the Tyrannosaurus rex. This strange scene quickly drew the attention of scientists. Seeing this perfect body, the professor knew that the appearance of the primitive man would cause public panic. Thus, the professor ordered strict secrecy until further conclusions could be drawn. However, a scientist named Aaron stepped forward and proposed reviving the primitive man using microorganisms. In this way, all the mysteries in everyone's hearts would be solved one by one. It must be said that this idea was risky but very intriguing. Under the professor's guidance, numerous medical instruments were inserted into the primitive man. Named Pickle by the professor, all environmental factors, from indoor temperature to the experience in the nutrient tank, were kept as consistent with the Jurassic period as possible. All efforts were to wait for a miracle to happen. However, after 3 months, the primitive man Pickle showed no signs of waking up. At this time, the man responsible for monitoring grew extremely bored and developed a craving for meat. The next moment, a terrifying thought arose, and soon, the scientist opened the door to the chamber. In front of him was the Tyrannosaurus rex corpse from 200 million years ago. He wanted to be the first human to taste Tyrannosaurus rex meat. Modern cooking techniques, combined with top-quality seasonings, made the mere 200 grams of Tyrannosaurus rex meat the most luxurious delicacy in human history. As the man feasted, he didn't realize that the rich aroma of meat had already filled the entire laboratory. At this moment, Pickle, sensing the familiar scent of food, slowly opened his eyes. After a 200 million year slumber, everything had changed. Facing the unfamiliar surroundings, Pickle appeared somewhat lost. He quickly tensed every muscle in his body, constantly on guard for potential dangers. However, the imagined enemy did not appear. Instead, he smelled a familiar scent in the air. Following the scent, Pickle soon found Aaron, who was enjoying the Tyrannosaurus rex meat. At this moment, Aaron was immersed in the delicious aroma of the meat, oblivious to the approaching danger. After a while, the water stains on the floor caught Aaron's attention. He turned around to find the primitive man had awakened. Aaron stood frozen, pondering how to grab his gun under Pickle's watchful eye. Unexpectedly, Pickle moved first, grabbed the Tyrannosaurus rex meat, and swallowed it whole without chewing. After eating, Pickle turned his gaze to Aaron, sniffed his scent, and, recognizing him as a fellow human, decided to spare Aaron and began exploring the room. With the crisis temporarily averted, Aaron quickly took out his gun, ready for anything. At this point, Pickle seemed to remember something and began roaring at Aaron. Unfortunately, despite Pickle howling for a long time, Aaron didn't understand a word. Finally, Pickle became angry, opened his mouth, and revealed his sharp fangs. As the situation spiraled out of control, Aaron immediately raised his gun and pulled the trigger. However, the gun, a symbol of human civilization, only managed to scratch the primitive man's flesh. Seeing this small gadget that could hurt him, Pickle was instantly intrigued. He then posed and flung the bullets with all his might, and in an instant, 3 bullets shot past like meteors. The next second, there were 3 loud bangs, and the bullets instantly pierced through the entire wall. Such terrifying power would impress even Yujiro. Taking advantage of Aaron's stunned state, Pickle swiftly grabbed the man who had injured him for the first time. Thinking his life was about to end, Aaron was surprised to find that Pickle was just shaking him wildly while pointing to his mouth. Aaron, looking like a fool, stood dumbfounded, while Pickle's emotions gradually got out of control. Finally, in a rage, he slapped Aaron, smashing him heavily against the cold storage door. Badly injured, Aaron was barely hanging on to life and was about to enter the cold storage to save himself, but Pickle appeared behind him again, and at that moment, a familiar smell caught Pickle's attention once more. He immediately left Aaron and turned towards the cold storage. Seeing the familiar Tyrannosaurus rex corpse, Pickle let out a deafening roar that shook the heavens. Seeing this, Aaron quickly closed the cold storage door and then went to report the good news to the professor, thinking that Pickle's awakening and capture would be a major achievement. However, the professor scoffed at this, knowing that Pickle's power could destroy the entire laboratory. Hearing the professor's high opinion of Pickle, the arriving agents were understandably skeptical. How strong could a primitive man possibly be? Stronger than King Kong? As the professor kindly warned the agents not to underestimate Pickle, there was suddenly a loud bang, and the huge laboratory wall shattered into pieces. Next, a demon-like figure slowly emerged. It was the primitive man, Pickle. At this moment, Pickle was clearly overwhelmed with anger, and the root cause was the death of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, leaving him without a worthy opponent. An enraged Pickle charged into the crowd like a prehistoric monster, and cars weighing tons were like scrap metal to him. Before long, everything in his way, including humans, was slaughtered. Seeing the hellish scene, the local police had no choice but to call the military for help. To be safe, the military deployed their most advanced mecha warriors. The human mecha, which had shone brightly in Pacific Rim, was now up against the strongest primitive man from 200 million years ago. Without a doubt, this was a battle for the ages. As everyone eagerly anticipated, Pickle soon proved how terrifying his strength was. With a single punch, tempered glass shattered instantly. Was this power really human? The stunned pilot slowly recovered, quickly maneuvered the mecha to lock Pickle's neck, and tried to end him, but to everyone's shock, Pickle, using sheer strength, held down the high-speed rotating mecha, destroying it on the spot. Pickle's strength left the watching military in awe. They realized that no matter how many troops were sent, they would only face death. So, amidst the shocked onlookers, the colonel slowly removed his clothing and approached Pickle. He knew that only with honesty could Pickle sense his respect. Even though their civilizations were separated by 200 million years, Pickle felt the colonel's sincere gaze. The colonel invited Pickle to go to Japan, where many similar beings awaited him. Thus, Pickle embarked on his journey to Japan. Escorted by the military, Pickle flew to Japan, where a group of strong individuals like him awaited. The primitive man's arrival was like a bombshell, completely shocking all of Japan. Countless people flocked to the airport to catch a glimpse of the primitive man. However, at this moment, a beautiful female reporter, trying to get first-hand information, crossed the soldiers' defenses to interview Pickle. Unbeknownst to her, this act would become her nightmare. After sleeping for 200 million years, Pickle's body was filled with primal desires. Now, the appearance of the female reporter ignited his inner lust. So, under the astonished gaze of the crowd, the beast-like Pickle directly pounced on the female reporter. Then, completely ignoring her screams, he tore off her clothes and coupled with her in front of countless onlookers. This shocking scene was even broadcasted worldwide. The soldiers tried to intervene, but how could ordinary people's attacks hurt Pickle? Thus, Pickle shamelessly fulfilled his desires in front of the world. After an unknown amount of time, Pickle stood up, and everyone kept their eyes fixed on him. Just as everyone was still reeling from Pickle's absurd behavior, the next moment, the instigator collapsed on the ground and fell asleep. The next day, news of Pickle's battle with the female reporter quickly spread worldwide. Countless protesters surrounded the military base holding Pickle. Seeing the mounting pressure, Japanese officials had heated discussions about whether to convict the primitive man. Pickle, as they argued, the world's strongest creature, Yujiro Hanma, appeared. Undoubtedly, his target was the imprisoned Pickle. As the soldiers prepared to stop him, Yujiro's imposing presence made them tremble, suffocating those around him. To save their lives, the two soldiers began fighting each other, hoping Yujiro would spare them. With the situation under his control, Yujiro kicked down the base's gate and slowly walked towards his opponent. The strongest creature versus the strongest primitive man. Who will emerge victorious? All the strong men were amazed by Pickle's incredible fighting power. Such a formidable opponent drew the attention of martial artists Kaya Retsu, Kosho Shinogi, Orochi Dappo, Jack Hanma, Guki Shibukawa, Orochi Katsumi, and environmental combat master Gaia. They all shared the same goal, to be the first to defeat the primitive man. At this moment, Pickle was sound asleep in his designated tree hollow, unaware that he was surrounded by a group of strong men. As they argued over who should be Pickle's first opponent, the violence-loving Jack moved first, delivering a powerful kick. The massive impact caused a violent shake. And finally, the primitive man Pickle slowly opened his eyes. Moments later, a beast-like foot slowly emerged, and a tall, imposing figure appeared before the crowd. Upon seeing the primitive man up close, nearly everyone had the same thought: this person is very strong. The next moment, before the crowd could recover from the shock, Pickle surprised them with a big gesture. He ignored everyone's presence and sprayed a waterfall-like stream on the tempered glass. Poor Dappo got splashed. Seeing that the crowd was frightened by urine, Yujiro Hanma, who had been silent, finally acted, mocking them as trash. Ignoring everyone, Yujiro walked straight to Pickle. Hearing this, the crowd was angry but silent, for Yujiro was acknowledged as the strongest on Earth. However, the young Katsumi disagreed and, without a word, aimed a whip kick at Yujiro, but Yujiro, taking the kick squarely, was unscathed. Instead, he casually took off Katsumi's shoelace and then looked at him with a mocking smile. With a single move, Yujiro effortlessly took down Katsumi and advanced towards Pickle with an overwhelming aura of dominance. Thus, the two great warriors spanning 200 million years finally clashed. Kosho Shinogi hurriedly opened the door for him, but Yujiro only chuckled. Thinking this tempered glass would stop the strongest creature on Earth was utterly laughable. Yujiro pressed his face against the glass, and as his strength increased, his expression grew menacing. The next second, the thick tempered glass shattered. Yujiro stood before Pickle, his eyes burning with battle intent. He wasn't worried that Pickle wouldn't understand his intentions, as there's always a resonance among the strong. It's important to note that Pickle didn't eat the T-Rex just for sustenance. During his era, only a powerful T-Rex could give Pickle the joy of battle. Sure enough, when Yujiro extended his fist, Pickle's right hand also stretched out. As their combined strength increased, the surrounding pressure became suffocating. Pickle, in the heat of battle, was unusually excited. Feeling a terrifying power not unlike the T-Rex, the frenzied combat instinct in him boiled, and Pickle inadvertently increased his strength again. Yujiro, in disbelief, found himself at a disadvantage. Finally, at the brink of collapse, Yujiro was forced to use his energy dispersal technique to avoid being defeated. Although he took Pickle down in one blow, it was clear who the victor really was. Falling to the ground, Pickle was clearly still dazed from the battle. After a while, he slowly got up, and even the simple act of standing seemed extremely graceful. Looking at the perfect human form before them, every martial artist felt envy and jealousy. Just as the crowd was about to challenge Pickle, an alarm broke the pre-fight silence. The military sent in armed soldiers to stop this farce, but when Yujiro emerged from the base, the military's attitude changed. They rushed to report to Yujiro and even kneeled, begging him to spare Pickle. They argued that Pickle was a cultural heritage of humanity and any harm to him would result in sanctions against all the officers in charge. Trembling, the higher-ups awaited Yujiro's answer, who knew they weren't lying. To keep the peace, he gave the military a break. Thus, under Yujiro's intimidation, the military not only didn't punish the intruders but also sent them off in an official vehicle. In the vehicle, everyone was sullen, clearly upset they didn't get to fight Pickle. The same went for Pickle, who realized in his fight with Yujiro that for the first time in 200 million years, he experienced the power of technique. He repeatedly recalled Yujiro's fighting style, trying to understand why his strength suddenly vanished. Pickle simulated scenarios in his mind, fighting various dinosaurs, but to no avail. This puzzling toy made Pickle very happy. The next day, Retsu came to the dojo as usual to practice. 9 solid bricks were neatly placed before him. In the next moment, Retsu's powerful strike shattered the 9th brick instantly. The spectators were awestruck. The only one who could perform such a feat was Retsu. Before they could recover, 2 more bricks shattered in succession. Such precise control of power made even Baki bow in admiration. Baki knelt and asked to be Retsu's disciple, hoping to learn ancient Chinese martial arts. Given their father-son-like relationship, one would think Retsu would be eager to teach Baki. Unexpectedly, facing Baki's request, Retsu decisively declined, and the reason was none other than that man, the primitive man, Pickle. The desire to fight him was irresistible. So, even close friends like Baki couldn't interest Retsu. However, Retsu wasn't the only one feeling this way. Pickle, too, was immersed in the energy-dissipating technique used by Yujiro. A month passed, and Pickle hadn't eaten anything besides necessary water. The professor was extremely worried, knowing that if Pickle's body deteriorated, it would be a great loss to the world. The scientists had to bring in ferocious beasts from all over as food for Pickle. However, those beasts, usually dominant in the jungle, sensed death at the sight of Pickle, forcing them to flee. For a proud warrior like Pickle, fleeing opponents weren't worthy of being his food. The scientists had no choice but to use their last resort, the Siberian tiger, the largest and strongest land predator. As the strongest land beast, the Siberian tiger is a symbol of royalty. Even when facing the primitive man, Pickle, it dared to roar fiercely at him. The tiger's appearance caught Pickle's attention, and his primal hunting desire began to boil. Finally, after a few moments of staring, both lunged at each other with great coordination. Initially, it seemed the two were evenly matched, but Pickle instantly killed the tiger with one strike. Soon, the incident of Pickle eating the Siberian tiger spread rapidly. People knew there were only around 500 Siberian tigers left in the world, and using such a precious animal as human food was seen as wasteful. However, some believed that Pickle's value surpassed any animal, and even if the Siberian tiger went extinct, it would be worth it. The two sides were locked in a fierce debate. At that moment, Retsu, watching TV, saw his opportunity. He approached Tokugawa, responsible for feeding Pickle, and expressed his desire to be Pickle's next meal. Tokugawa was stunned but soon understood Retsu's true intention. He wanted to use this opportunity to fight the primitive man. So, under Tokugawa's arrangement, Retsu finally had his first duel with Pickle, who would emerge victorious. The legendary fighter Retsu versus the primitive man Pickle. Would the ancient Chinese martial arts master shake the most perfect strength? Even Retsu himself was eager to know the answer. Sensing a powerful presence approaching, Pickle's beastly instinct made him stand up for the first time. The next moment, Retsu suddenly appeared and leaped in front of Pickle. A terrifying pressure filled the air, and sensing the battle, Pickle readied himself for combat. Though they lived in different eras, true warriors never need much communication. They exchanged glances, and Pickle attacked first, swinging his massive palm to slap Retsu to death. There was a loud crash, and Retsu felt the terrifying power capable of defeating Yujiro. However, Retsu had his own pride and faced the charging Pickle head-on. A fierce whip kick landed on Pickle's face, and in that moment of pain, Retsu unleashed his 18 skills. Even a braid became a deadly weapon against the enemy. Facing Retsu's relentless assault, Pickle, despite his strength, became a punching bag for Retsu. Fortunately, Pickle's defense was astonishing, enduring nearly 100 attacks without a scratch. Seeing this, Retsu was also in disbelief. As his attacks were all aimed at vulnerable parts like the brain, the resulting concussion would have killed or injured an ordinary person 100 times over, but the primitive man before him was still standing. The next second, Pickle moved with such speed that even Retsu didn't have time to react, and he was slapped to his knees. Immediately, Pickle's hands gripped Retsu's body tightly, and then a scene that sent chills down everyone's spines occurred. Pickle opened his gaping mouth and bit off a chunk of Retsu's flesh, swallowing it before his eyes. Before Retsu could react, Pickle opened his mouth, revealing his blood-red fangs, ready for another bite. In a moment of crisis, Retsu elbowed Pickle to push him away and broke free. Seeing Pickle still chewing, Retsu's fury quickly ignited. This time, Retsu decided to go all out. Using his trump card to end Pickle, Retsu, unwilling to accept this outcome, took off his shoes, leaped, and aimed a powerful kick at Pickle, but the result remained unchanged. Before absolute strength, all techniques were meaningless. Knocked to the ground, Retsu struggled to stand up, his mind consumed by the primitive man's terrifying power. Looking at the imposing primitive man, the martial faith within Retsu began to crumble. He slowly approached Pickle, and his determined gaze revealed a resolve unafraid of death. Finally, Retsu made a decision, preparing to use a technique he had never used before, aiming to defend his title as Sea King. The next moment, Retsu raised both fists above his head, and as he kicked off, his fists spun like a windmill, leaving countless afterimages. Yes, this was Retsu's trump card, the ultimate turbulent punch, a move completely divergent from ancient Chinese martial arts. It not only discarded all martial arts techniques but also attacked wildly based on emotion. Faced with such a bizarre attack, even Pickle took several heavy blows. Seeing his prey unleash such a fierce offensive, Pickle immediately gathered all his strength to end the game, but to everyone's surprise, Retsu suddenly blocked him with a high kick. This scene shocked everyone present, including Retsu himself, who couldn't believe he had blocked Pickle's full-force strike. Before Retsu could recover from the shock, Pickle's attacks followed closely. However, no matter the angle of attack, Retsu seemed to predict his moves and blocked each one. Under this mysterious power, Retsu pushed Pickle back for the first time. At that moment, an eerie sound came from above the arena. Retsu looked up to see a huge, shadowy figure standing behind him. Retsu looked perplexed at the giant phantom resembling himself. Unbeknownst to him, this phantom was the pinnacle form Retsu had yearned for years. For a long time, Retsu was crowned as the #1 martial artist in China. While this title brought Retsu immense honor, it also became a burden on his path of cultivation. But now, Retsu has let go of everything and devoted himself completely to martial arts. Finally, on this day, Retsu reached the pinnacle of martial arts. At this moment, Retsu was completely different from before. Facing Pickle's fierce and relentless attacks, Retsu instinctively blocked them effectively. Moreover, Retsu's strength had improved significantly. With a light tap, he caused the primitive man to experience a pain he hadn't felt in 200 million years. Retsu clearly didn't intend to give his opponent time to breathe. Powerful whip kicks repeatedly struck Pickle's skull. Finally, Retsu lifted his right leg, gathered all his strength, and grabbed Pickle's hair. With a loud bang, Pickle fell to the ground, life and death uncertain. In an instant, shock was written on everyone's face. However, at this moment, a sudden turn of events occurred in the arena. The heavily injured Pickle moved again. This scene made Tokugawa cry out, "It's impossible!" Retsu's last attack should have broken someone's neck on the spot. Even if the opponent was a primitive man, he couldn't have been unscathed. For this strange situation, the professor immediately provided the correct answer. At its core, Pickle's body strength had long surpassed the limits of modern humans, especially his cervical vertebrae, which were as strong as those of large four-legged beasts, not something humans could have. Thus, the only reasonable explanation was that Pickle might be hiding an unknown quadrupedal form. As if sensing the audience's doubts, Pickle confirmed their suspicions through his actions. He leaped and landed on all fours, growling at Retsu like a beast. At this moment, Pickle had completely shed his humanity, resembling a fierce beast staring him down. The sense of pressure made Retsu highly alert. He immediately focused all his strength into his arms. This time, he decided to use the most powerful move in ancient Chinese boxing, the devastating punch, in an attempt to confront the opponent's terrifying strength head-on. The next second, Pickle moved first. With a single leg push, he burst forth like lightning. Seeing Pickle's fangs approaching, Retsu shouted, "Break!" A mighty force exploded from Retsu's right arm. At the moment of collision, a loud bang echoed throughout the arena. In the battlefield, Retsu's figure instantly disappeared. Then another loud bang, and Retsu's body crashed through the guardrail, shattering it. But it wasn't over. The massive impact sent Retsu flying, finally crashing into a wall 100 meters away. With just one hit, Pickle defeated Retsu at his peak, truly terrifying. If Retsu was the shield in modern martial arts, then without a doubt, Pickle was the unstoppable spear. This time, the debate between the two finally had an answer. As everyone was still immersed in Pickle's strength, Pickle slowly walked towards his prey. This action made Tokugawa exclaim in dismay. Pickle clearly intended to treat Retsu as food. Unlike the observing professor, Tokugawa, who had a deep friendship with Retsu, couldn't just stand by, risking being eaten at any moment. Tokugawa rushed toward Pickle to try and stop him. Little did he know, no matter how he shouted, it was futile. To a beast like Pickle, there is no mercy. All creatures blocking his path are enemies. With a slap, Pickle swatted Tokugawa away, then opened his mouth and howled, announcing his victory. Instantly, the monstrous roar echoed through the streets of Tokyo. After venting all his anger, Pickle bared his fangs and bit down on Retsu's body. If not for the professor sedating Pickle at the last moment, Retsu would have been devoured. Retsu had sworn to be Pickle's food if he lost. But now, losing only his right leg, he escaped. This outcome was unacceptable to Retsu. As a martial artist, losing a duel and not keeping his promise, but instead, surviving was disgraceful. While Retsu was deep in self-blame, Baki came to visit. Learning about Retsu's concerns, Baki immediately offered sincere comfort. To him, fighting a primitive man was an honor. After all, the opponent was a prehistoric monster that fed on Tyrannosaurus Rex. So, Baki hoped Retsu would forget the vow, turn sorrow into strength, and move forward. Baki's words were infectious, and Retsu soon emerged from the shadows. Meanwhile, the news of Retsu's defeat by Pickle was like a bombshell, shocking Tokyo's martial arts world. With Retsu's strength, he almost died at Pickle's hands. How formidable was this primitive man? Cutting to the lab containing Pickle, they received dreadful news. A meter-thick alloy door was smashed. The only person to have broken that door was Yujiro. Naked, Pickle stood on the rooftop, gazing at the city's neon lights. Feeling a bit tired, he found a garbage pile and fell asleep. Before long, an oblivious and rude person walked by. Unbeknownst to him, this action would lead to disaster. The next second, a large hand suddenly grabbed him. Before he could react, he was dragged into the garbage pile, leaving a cry echoing in the air. Moments later, a large figure slowly emerged from the darkness. After escaping the lab, he wandered Tokyo's streets, looking for his next opponent. The next moment, a heavy truck hit Pickle, sending him flying. The driver was shocked. Nervously, he got out to check, only to be shocked again. Pickle, instead of being dead, was laughing. Before the driver could speak, Pickle stood up, looked around, and seemed to search for the attacker, identifying his target. He showed a fierce expression, entered battle mode, and swung at the truck. Seeing the opponent still standing, Pickle got angry, grabbing the truck's front. He lifted it effortlessly. Just then, the part connecting the truck's front and body shattered. Before Pickle could react, he was pinned down by the truck's front. After being knocked down twice, Pickle got back up and kicked the truck, tearing off the door. Suddenly, the smell of meat from the truck overwhelmed him. He was stunned, not expecting such delicious fresh meat under the truck's hard exterior. Pickle began eating, and after satisfying his hunger, he continued wandering the streets. Unexpectedly, a waiter blocked his way. The waiter had witnessed Pickle's fight with the truck. He thought Pickle was the strongest male he had ever seen. Throughout history, heroes have always had beauties by their side. He had a beauty to recommend to Pickle. For 3,000 yen, Pickle could experience a royal treatment. Even though Pickle didn't understand what he was saying, his instincts told him to follow the waiter. But as they were about to leave, someone blocked their way. It turned out that to avenge Retsu, Katsumi issued a bounty to capture Pickle. Soon, the Shinshinkai blocked Pickle at the club entrance. Seeing the Shinshinkai logo on their chest, the waiter immediately softened. However, Hanayama didn't take the Shinshinkai seriously. Pickle's actions in Tokyo had already caused a stir in the martial arts world, attracting Hanayama's attention. Finally finding Pickle alone, Hanayama was eager to challenge him. As they were about to face off, the Shinshinkai's top disciple grew anxious. Knowing he couldn't beat Hanayama, he invoked the Shinshinkai name, asking Hanayama to spare Pickle. Upon hearing this, Hanayama's followers snapped. "Who are the Shinshinkai to tell our boss what to do?" With that, a hidden dagger was pressed against the disciple. Facing such taunting, the disciple used his superb karate skills, causing Hanayama's follower to bleed profusely. The cold gleam of the dagger caught Pickle's attention. As he reached out to touch it, Hanayama acted simultaneously. In a flash, both grabbed the blade. Sensing the challenge in Hanayama's eyes, Pickle grew excited. Unconsciously, he tightened his grip, and with a crisp sound, the dagger shattered. The next second, Pickle delivered a powerful punch, sending Hanayama flying like garbage. Hanayama landed among the crowd, his fate uncertain. His followers tried to avenge him, but Pickle twisted one's arm like a pretzel with just one punch. The top disciple also tried to stop him, but Pickle casually slapped him into unconsciousness. Seeing this terrifying scene, no one dared to intervene. As Pickle turned to leave, the resilient Hanayama stood up again. With a howl, Hanayama pushed his strength to the limit. For a moment, even Pickle retreated under the immense power. Such a formidable opponent reminded Pickle of the Triceratops, renowned for its strength. However, unlike the prehistoric beast, Hanayama's physique seemed delicate and small, yet he could unleash terrifying power. Facing such a question, Pickle's competitive spirit was fully ignited. At that moment, he had been waiting for a long time, as it was the first time he met an evenly matched opponent since waking up. Just as Pickle was excited, Hanayama stopped moving. Pickle was puzzled, but Hanayama signaled for Pickle to look behind him. It turned out that Hanayama's appearance was on Baki's request to stall Pickle, as the real showdown was between Baki and Pickle. Seeing Pickle up close, Baki felt a tinge of jealousy at his perfect physique. Countless battle scenarios with Pickle flashed through Baki's mind, but all seemed like desecrating Pickle's body, leaving Baki momentarily stunned. Sensing Baki's intent, Pickle, like Yujiro, extended his hand towards Baki. Baki smiled and returned the gesture with his right fist, but when their fists collided, a tremendous force surged from Pickle. Before Baki could react, the force threw him off balance. Not only was Pickle overpowering in strength, but he also seemed to be mastering techniques while fighting various strong opponents. With a successful move, Pickle looked at Baki with a smile, seemingly waiting for a response. Unknowingly, this action angered Baki, and his blood ignited instantly. The next second, a high kick struck Pickle's face. Surprisingly, Pickle didn't dodge but took the sneak attack head-on. Baki, feeling awkward, was about to apologize, but Pickle, unfazed, signaled Baki to change locations. The two went to the Tokyo Underground fighting arena, where Pickle wanted to face Baki in battle. Baki removed his shirt, ready for a big fight, but Hanayama was worried. He thought involving an outsider in a human fight might be bullying. Realizing this, Baki felt ashamed for selfishly dragging a primitive man into training just because he was bored. Little did Baki know, Pickle was also yearning for an intense fight. With that, Pickle suddenly charged and kicked Baki with full force. In an instant, Baki felt his chest crushed like under a heavy truck, flying tens of meters away. Until losing consciousness, Baki was still immersed in Pickle's terrifying strength. Defeating Baki with one move, Pickle, like a modern man, raised his right fist, proclaiming victory. Thus, their first encounter ended with the strongest boy's defeat. That night, Baki couldn't sleep, as Pickle's destructive kick haunted his dreams. Baki knew that in terms of strength, Pickle surpassed Yujiro. Baki vowed that after recovering, he would face Pickle again. Meanwhile, young Katsumi knew he and Pickle were worlds apart, so he trained tirelessly to improve in karate. Little did he know, Retsu thought it was futile. To defeat Pickle, one must combine China's 5,000-year martial arts culture to create a new form of boxing for a slim chance of victory. But as a disabled person, Retsu could no longer do it, so he placed all his hopes on Katsumi. After some joint training, they developed a new form of boxing, simulating a whip's effect with the body's 31 joints. Starting with the foot, power is incrementally gathered through the body and finally focused at the fingertips. The terrifying speed generated can even surpass the speed of sound, thus called the Supersonic punch. To avoid Baki and Retsu's tragedy, the professor covered the arena with chloroform, potent enough to sedate Retsu. Pickle lay on the ground, fast asleep. While everyone was discussing how to handle this prehistoric creature, a large hand slowly emerged from the gas. Everyone froze, stunned that in such a high concentration of anesthetic gas, Pickle had only slept for an hour before waking up. Upon waking, Pickle looked around, the fighting spirit evident in his eyes. Seeing this, the professor immediately understood Pickle was looking for a fight. Clearly, after the previous two battles, Pickle had noticed that staying here would bring strong opponents to him. At this moment, Tokugawa had a bright idea and told Pickle in human language that his opponent would arrive soon. Surprisingly, Pickle seemed to understand Tokugawa and slowly submerged himself in the gas. Meanwhile, Baki, now healthy, resumed his training. By hitting newspapers, he gained new insights into controlling sharpness. Katsumi's self-created boxing technique, guided by Retsu, also began to show results. As the two were diligently researching the secrets of the perfect supersonic punch, an elder's chuckle echoed. A figure appeared like a ghost. It was the legendary Grandmaster Kayakaku. Katsumi was so nervous he couldn't speak. After a brief greeting, the elder got straight to the point, highlighting the many flaws in their so-called supersonic punch. He said such a technique being labeled perfect was a great insult to the supersonic punch. Then, Kayakaku pulled out an egg, handed it to Retsu, and hung it with a thin line. Kayakaku stood calmly. The next second, a shadow flashed, and the egg was neatly cut in half, with the yolk intact. This scene stunned Katsumi and Retsu. They couldn't believe human technique could reach such terrifying levels. Kayakaku calmly swallowed the egg and patiently explained the essence to Katsumi. He explained that while human joints are limited, imagination is limitless. To make a punch faster than sound, one must break free from mental limitations and infinitely expand the number of joints. With Kayakaku's guidance, Katsumi began training immediately. However, no matter how he tried, he couldn't avoid the egg shattering. Katsumi couldn't understand the problem and repeatedly replayed Kayakaku's movements in his mind. Finally, a light bulb went off, and Katsumi realized the issue was his lack of determination. Both elephants and giraffes extend certain parts of their bodies for survival, and an egg's hard shell protects the delicate yolk for survival. Thinking of this, Katsumi put pressure on himself and finally achieved a clean crack in the eggshell. Compared to Katsumi's focused practice, Dappo was drinking and chatting with the #1 Chinese martial artist. As Kayakaku enjoyed his feast, he sincerely praised Katsumi's talent, even saying it rivaled Retsu's. Since mastering the supersonic punch, Katsumi's progress had been rapid. He realized his previous understanding of the punch was wrong. To achieve a truly perfect supersonic punch, one must not only imagine the joints infinitely but also relax the muscles like a baby. Only then could a full-force punch truly surpass the speed of sound. With a deafening bang, all the glass in the dojo shattered. Such was the terrifying power of the perfect supersonic punch. Seeing the mess before him, Katsumi's eyes were filled with contentment. He finally earned the right to challenge Pickle. Cutting to Baki, his gaze turned towards the Shinshinkai dojo. He knew Katsumi had completed his transformation, and now it was time for his own rigorous training. Baki's demon brain activated, and a shadow that struck fear into many hearts appeared. The Tokyo arena was packed, with everyone eager to witness Katsumi defeat Pickle and claim the title of the strongest. In the hallway, Katsumi strode forward, only to find Baki waiting for him. Blood stained his skin, dripping down his body. It was unimaginable how brutal his fight with the Tyrannosaurus Rex must have been. But today's focus wasn't on Baki, it was on Katsumi. Without pause, Katsumi walked confidently into the arena, carrying the expectations of Baki and his father. In the next second, the audience's cheers exploded like thunder in front of Katsumi. All the Shinshinkai disciples stood up, performing the iconic karate stance. Among them were even Grandmaster Kayakaku and the fist hero Retsu. This was their sincere support for Katsumi. With a roar from the top Shinshinkai disciple, the atmosphere in the arena peaked. Almost at the same moment, an eager Pickle lunged forward like a dragon beast unleashed. Katsumi showed no fear, countering with a lightning-fast 5-whip attack, striking Pickle. The 5-whip hit vulnerable parts of the body, even causing Pickle pain. With this successful move, Katsumi didn't intend to give his opponent time to breathe. He lifted his right leg and aimed a whip kick at Pickle's most vulnerable area. Instantly, a soul-deep pain surged through Pickle's body from below. Taking advantage of Pickle's pain, Katsumi leaped up and punched him in the face. Now, Katsumi was strong enough to surprise Baki, but defeating Pickle would require more. The next second, Pickle mustered all his strength and kicked, knocking Katsumi off balance. Katsumi crashed to the ground, unconscious. Even Baki was once defeated by Pickle's kick. Would Katsumi share the same fate? Katsumi endured excruciating pain and slowly got back on his feet, exuding a regal aura that filled the arena. Sensing Katsumi's powerful aura, Pickle excitedly adopted his unique stance when facing a formidable opponent. Seeing the massive figure in the arena, Baki couldn't help but think of his father, Yujiro. The pressure made Katsumi's expression serious. But so what? Now, he was no longer garbage. No matter how strong the opponent, he dared to fight. In the next second, his 4-footed stance powered a perfect supersonic punch through countless joints, striking Pickle. A deafening boom shook the audience's eardrums. As Pickle felt the terrifying power, the image of a T-Rex flashed in his mind. In his memory, only a T-Rex's tail could unleash such force. Before Pickle recovered from the shock, he was curled up from the blow, then fell to his knees, and the cheers erupted. The undefeated myth of Pickle was finally broken. Severe pain radiated from his abdomen, and Pickle couldn't believe that a human had made him feel pain again after 200 million years. But for Katsumi to achieve this, he paid a painful price. To unleash a perfect supersonic punch, the muscles endure intense pressure, combined with Pickle's tough body. Katsumi's left fist was almost crippled, but he smiled, because he proved that a punch comparable to the speed of sound could hurt Pickle. This gave him hope of defeating Pickle. Filled with fighting spirit, Katsumi unleashed another supersonic punch, delivering 2 devastating attacks to Pickle. Finally, the arrogant primitive man fell heavily, but the cost was Katsumi's hands and foot, all suffering comminuted fractures. The horrific scene stunned the audience, but the victory still belonged to Katsumi. However, shortly after, Pickle got up, towering over Katsumi as if unscathed. He adopted the stance that once defeated Retsu. Despair and frustration were written on everyone's faces. No one thought the near-dead Katsumi could withstand Pickle's charge, but they were wrong. In despair, humans often unleash limitless potential, especially Katsumi. When Kayakaku first explained the supersonic punch's essence, Katsumi conceived a terrifying thought whether a punch could surpass the speed of sound. Now, Pickle's strength gave him a chance to try the ultimate supersonic punch. Instantly, Katsumi's bones evolved, and his joints doubled. Like scales, without a doubt. With so many joints, the ultimate supersonic punch could destroy everything. With a thunderous boom, Pickle was sent flying by the immense force. At the same time, blood rained down on the audience. Pickle fell and lost consciousness, but Katsumi paid a severe price. His arm was stripped of flesh, revealing white bone. The audience was stunned. Clearly, this battle surpassed their limits. After a while, Katsumi moved first, raising his right arm to proclaim victory. The arena erupted, and the cheers echoed through Tokyo. Everyone raised their fists in symbolic salute to Katsumi. Katsumi bowed 90 degrees, but as he lowered his head, a terrifying scene unfolded. With all limbs crippled, he had no strength to fight, and if Pickle woke, his life would end. Then, Pickle's eyes filled with tears. Seeing this, Katsumi was content. He knew this was mutual respect among the strong. Pickle had fully accepted him. shedding tears before their parting. But rules are rules, the loser becomes the winner's meal. A prehistoric law. As Pickle awoke, Katsumi, grateful, made his decision. He decided to keep his promise and die willingly. Kayukaku covered his face, unwilling to watch, but no one could stop Katsumi's resolve. Pickle moved, a blur, and blood rained again, with a human arm in his mouth. Unlike Katsumi's acceptance, Pickle cried at losing a strong opponent. In the next second, Katsumi lost consciousness and collapsed. As Pickle slowly approached Katsumi, Tokugawa faced a tough choice, whether to keep the promise and watch his friend die, or break the promise and save Katsumi at all costs. With Tokugawa's hand raised, hidden mercenaries prepared to strike, but Doppo appeared, stopping everything. He wouldn't allow Tokugawa to save Katsumi on his own. This was a man's fight between men. Even in death, he wanted to keep his promise. At that moment, a sudden change occurred in the arena. Pickle knelt down, hands clasped in prayer, over Katsumi's body. This scene stunned the audience. No one expected such a proud warrior like Pickle to show compassion for a human. Katsumi's resilience earned Pickle's respect. He not only prayed for Katsumi but also chose to leave, fasting. Looking at Katsumi's battered body, all the Shinshinkai disciples knelt down. To them, even though Katsumi was defeated by Pickle, his spirit deserved everyone's respect. Undoubtedly, Katsumi now deserved the title of martial arts master. After the battle, Retsu visited Katsumi in the hospital and made him tea. Looking at Katsumi's empty left hand, Retsu bowed his head. He envied Katsumi, who also survived his battle with Pickle, but Katsumi reached new heights. Just then, an irritating voice spoke. "A loss is a loss. Stop making excuses," said Baki, who came to visit. In the past, Baki's provocation would have angered Katsumi, but now, he was no longer impulsive. He didn't care about Baki's mockery. That night, Baki trained in his basement, and his simulation target was Pickle. Surprisingly, Baki's demon brain, which even worked for Yujiro, failed against Pickle. Even though he had seen Pickle and witnessed his fighting skills, he couldn't simulate him. The untouchable feeling was like ants crawling on his skin, making Baki restless. It was so exciting that Baki couldn't wait to fight Pickle. Knowing Baki wanted to fight, Retsu promised to contact Tokugawa for an arrangement. Seeing Baki's eager expression, Retsu was shocked. Jack, also of Hama blood, was even crazier, challenging Pickle alone. Seeing an opponent similar to him, Pickle laughed heartily. Indeed, staying here would bring a steady stream of prey. Jack didn't waste time, removing his coat and throwing a strong punch. The impact bent Pickle's head back exaggeratedly before slowly returning to place. Jack was outwardly calm but inwardly panicked, knowing his full-strength punch could shatter bones. Yet the primitive man was unscathed. Pickle's neck bones were terrifyingly strong. Surprisingly, even his relatively fragile teeth were unaffected. Seeing this, Jack's competitive spirit was fully ignited. His demon fang name was famous in Tokyo, and his bite could tear a coconut shell. Why not see whose teeth were sharper? Jack bared his fangs, challenging Pickle. Pickle understood and also bared his fangs, ready to attack. Next second, they collided, producing a loud crash. Two beasts spanning 200 million years collided. Tokugawa received Baki's call, learning he wanted to fight Pickle, so he revealed the current situation. Hearing this, Baki was shocked and rushed to the arena. Meanwhile, the biting battle continued. Jack's demon fang power pinned Pickle down. Seeing victory, Jack opened his mouth widely, trying to end Pickle in one bite. Unexpectedly, Pickle powered up and tossed Jack aside like garbage. Next second, a terrifying scene occurred. Jack's chest was drenched in blood, and his face's flesh was gone. Undoubtedly, it was ripped off by Pickle in the collision. Pickle calmly swallowed Jack's flesh, preparing for a feast. Half his face eaten, Jack laughed crazily, as if insane. Tokugawa was dumbfounded, wondering if Jack was struck silly. Jack's counterattack was coming. Next second, he leaped forward, accelerating beyond the speed of sound, and delivered a devastating punch, knocking Pickle away. Who else but Jack could do this? However, after landing a blow, Jack stood still. Pickle's touch was unlike any opponent. His iron fist could easily crush skulls, but Pickle's jaw was unmovable, like a massive rock, all thanks to Pickle's neck, as strong as a buffalo's, which could withstand all-powerful impacts. Despite eating Jack's two heavy punches, Pickle was under immense pressure. Pickle then adopted the battle stance that once defeated Retsu and Katsumi in a single move. This time, could Jack break Pickle's undefeated myth? Baki and Retsu hurried over after hearing the news. Before they could enter the arena, beastly roars filled the air. The next second, To everyone's shock, Jack blocked Pickle's killing blow. He then countered, slamming Pickle into the audience. Seeing Jack, with half his face bloodied and cradling himself, Baki knew their battle was brutal. However, the fight wasn't over. Jack grabbed Pickle's hair and smashed him to the ground. Once wasn't enough, so Jack powered up and threw Pickle again. Before Pickle could get up, an enraged Jack kicked him again. After consecutive brutal attacks, even Pickle began to feel pain. But Jack, bloodthirsty, didn't plan to end the game. He had trained tirelessly to earn the strongest title. Now, with everyone focused on Pickle, Jack felt challenged. With a howl, Jack bit Pickle's ear. With a fierce pull, the world went silent. Without a mirror, Pickle didn't know his appearance, but looking at the bloody piece in his hand, he knew it was part of him. With the sting from his left ear, everything went dead silent. Suddenly, an unprecedented rage erupted within him. Seeing Pickle, consumed by hatred, Jack began to taunt him even more recklessly. At the same time, he delivered a powerful punch to Pickle. The next second, Jack felt something was wrong, though he landed a solid punch. Pickle stood firm. Could it be that Pickle had grown skilled enough to dodge attacks? Suppressing his shock, Jack tried a sweeping kick at Pickle. Surprisingly, the result was the same. Apart from the eerie sound of the surrounding dust, Pickle was unmoved. As Pickle emerged from the dust, a strong sense of danger forced Jack to back away. 2 attacks missed, and Jack couldn't figure out why. But when he saw 2 dents on the wall behind Pickle, he understood. When Jack used his full strength for the strongest hit, Pickle, at the moment of contact, reflexively retreated at lightning speed, using the wall as a springboard to return to his original position. Thinking carefully, with such terrifying reflexes, only Pickle could achieve this today. After all, feeding on T-Rex, Pickle must have superior reflexes. Now, facing the charging Pickle, all Jack could do was pray. With all his strength, Pickle delivered a heavy punch, snapping Jack's neck 90 degrees backward. With a successful move, Pickle didn't intend to give Jack a break. Grabbing Jack's jaw, he spun him rapidly in the air. Pickle then smashed Jack in the face. Instantly, Jack flew back like a kite, crashing into the wall. His jawbone was shattered, and blood sprayed everywhere. Pickle slowly approached Jack, who lay unconscious. Knowing he won again, tears then welled up in Pickle's eyes. Seeing this, Baki was confused, but Retsu knew it was a sign of farewell. Tokugawa, also in tears, watched. Both Katsumi and Retsu were his protégés. Now disabled by Pickle, Jack was another name on the list. Yet, despite the heartbreak, Tokugawa could only watch. Pickle approached Jack, mouth open, but next second, a killing intent came. Before Pickle could react, a white light flashed, and he stood dazed. In this moment, the unconscious Jack suddenly sprang up, jabbing his middle fingers and piercing Pickle's eardrum. Even more terrifying, the strike severed his central nervous system. Blood dripped, but it was all fantasy. Though Jack lost his ability to resist, his keen senses made Pickle aware of a familiar danger. He recalled an ancient creature, smaller but painfully memorable. Back then, Pickle crushed it and swallowed it whole, but the taste was bittersweet. As he savored it, a sharp pain erupted, followed by a burning sensation, spreading like lava. Suddenly, Pickle felt his head would explode and rolled around, losing consciousness. Eventually, Rain woke him, though he survived. The excruciating pain seared into Pickle's heart like a brand. Equally memorable was the terrifying opponent who could counterattack even when killed. Now, Pickle realized the unconscious Jack was that type of opponent. Instinctively, Pickle abandoned eating and crouched off to the side. Seeing Pickle's unusual behavior, Tokugawa was baffled. With questions, Tokugawa approached Jack to check. The next second, an astonishing scene unfolded. Jack, previously unconscious, suddenly sprang up, jabbing with his middle fingers. A stream of blood splattered. Had Tokugawa been taller, he might have been decapitated on the spot. Seeing this, Baki broke into a cold sweat. Jack was terrifying. Had Pickle not sensed danger, Jack might have pulled off a miraculous comeback. Badly injured, Jack was rushed to the hospital. After treatment, he passed the critical stage. Thinking the battle ended, they were shocked when Jack, after waking, sought out Pickle again. Upon returning, Jack kicked Pickle without a word. Before Pickle could react, Jack went berserk, kicking repeatedly. As usual, he couldn't harm Pickle, but his actions baffled his opponent. Such a tenacious adversary was a first for Pickle. Previously, fighting various beasts, if one fell, it meant the battle was over. However, for Jack, The ancient rule was nonsense. He was willing to die to grow stronger, and as long as he had breath, he'd fight to the end. Suddenly, fear arose within Pickle, causing this arrogant primitive man to flee for the first time. But as Pickle ran out of the arena, seeing the fearful stares, he came to his senses. His pride wouldn't allow such a shameful escape. In the end, Jack suffered 2 consecutive defeats in one day to Pickle. He was even publicly humiliated, tied to a skyscraper's rooftop. Now, even peak Retsu, Katsumi, and Jack suffered defeat. Tokugawa couldn't think of any young fighter who could challenge Pickle. However, Yujiro believed Baki could defeat Pickle. Tokugawa was puzzled, as Jack also had Hama blood but still lost. Yujiro explained that Jack's blood purity was far less than Baki's. The battle results showed his Hama blood was weak. Cutting to the Tokyo Underground arena, Baki and Pickle faced each other. Baki could no longer bear just watching, so he decided to wait in the arena, waiting for Pickle to attack. He believed even a primitive man couldn't go long without eating. When hunger clouded his judgment, Pickle would unleash his wildest strength. Thus, their standoff lasted 3 days and 3 nights. Starving, Pickle devoured the Tyrannosaurus meat completely, leaving nothing behind. He thought a full belly would lead to a great battle, but little did he know, Pickle wouldn't fight for food for the next 2 years. The remaining Tyrannosaurus carcass still weighed dozens of tons, and with current technology, it could be cloned into edible meat within 2 years, perfectly solving the food problem. Thus, Pickle no longer needed to fight. However, Hanayama, who had once clashed head-on with Pickle, had a different idea. Hanayama felt in Pickle the same desire to win that modern martial artists have. So even if not for food, Pickle would definitely battle Baki. At this moment, in the Tokyo Underground fighting arena, Baki and Pickle faced each other, admiring each other like beautiful things. Moments later, Baki moved, knowing well that Pickle was a proud warrior. To provoke such a person, only one move was needed to enrage him completely. The next second, Baki placed his hand on Pickle's face, treating him like a child. Entering combat mode, Baki didn't waste words and immediately launched his signature whip kick. The terrifying force made the primitive man's eyes turn white. Clearly, even he couldn't fully resist Baki's attack. Having gained the upper hand, Baki clearly didn't intend to give Pickle any time to recover. He lifted his right leg and started a frenzied barrage of kicks to Pickle's face. This power made Retsu at ringside feel that Baki had murderous intent. Baki had been looking forward to this fight for too long, and now that he finally had the chance, he erupted with intense killing intent. Feeling the scent of death, Pickle wanted to escape, but Baki seized the moment and executed a nearly perfect chokehold from behind. Once this technique was applied, in a life-or-death match, it was as good as a death sentence. At the last moment, Pickle summoned all his strength, carrying Baki on his back in a wild sprint. Finally, he jumped onto the 100-meter-high fence along the spectator seats. The next second, a shocking scene occurred. Pickle, carrying Baki, leapt down from a height of 100 meters. This free fall from such a height would kill an ordinary person 100 times over. Had Pickle lost his mind, wanting to die together with Baki? With a thunderous roar, both bodies landed at the same time. The huge impact shattered the floor of the arena, even causing the massive fighting venue to emit plumes of white smoke. When everything returned to calm, the scene in the arena once again stunned the 3 people at ringside. Pickle and Baki both stood unharmed at their original positions, jumping down from a height of 100 meters and ending up safe and sound. Such terrifying physical strength wasn't only possessed by Pickle. Had Baki's body also been trained to a level comparable to Pickle's? The fact is, although Baki's body was far beyond ordinary people, it wasn't enough to withstand the huge impact from a fall of 100 meters. The reason he could still stand was purely due to Baki's tenacious willpower forcibly supporting his body. Although Baki appeared unharmed on the surface, his internal organs had shifted severely due to the violent impact. This internal pain was excruciating for Baki, like carrying a 1,000-kilo boulder on his back. However, at this critical moment, Pickle nearby took the opportunity to move. Just when everyone thought the battle was decided, Pickle, seemingly in control, suddenly knelt down with endless regret on his face. In Pickle's eyes, Baki was a rare toy, but now he had destroyed him completely. At this moment, Pickle clasped his hands and started to pray sincerely, hoping Baki would recover soon. But the pure-minded Pickle could never know that this move was seen by Baki as a great humiliation. Enraged to the extreme, he endured the severe pain throughout his body and swung his right fist fiercely towards Pickle's face. At this moment, Baki's pride had completely surpassed his physical pain. This ignited an unparalleled terrifying power in the young man. Almost at the same instant, Feeling the strong battle intent of the other, Pickle also became excited. Then he threw a punch with all his might. But unexpectedly, just before it was about to hit, the iron fist eerily stopped in midair. In an instant, everyone was baffled, wondering what Pickle was playing at. He was just playing with Baki, and Baki in the arena understood this. In an instant, a nameless rage swept through his entire body. It was just too arrogant. The next second, a golden light shone, and Baki's brain was instantly enveloped in this light. When the light faded, Baki slowly left the arena and walked towards the 100-meter-high spectator seats. Finally, under the incredibly shocked gazes of the audience, he jumped down from the same spot. But this time, Baki seemed like a different person, sitting unharmed at the original spot. The counterattack of the cunning Baki was about to come. No one had ever seen such a crazy guy jump down from 100 meters high. Such a lunatic act left the 200-million-year-old primitive man completely baffled. He was pretending, just like ancient animals that feign death to survive. But is that really the case? The next second, Baki proved everything with his actions. A powerful punch was launched with such speed that even Pickle didn't have time to react. But strangely, this punch, which clearly hit, was like hitting air and had no effect. Before people could react, Baki suddenly leaped into the air and delivered a flying kick to Pickle's chin. But this time, Baki's attack worked, and Pickle staggered and fell heavily to the ground. This scene stunned everyone on sight. It looked like a very ordinary flying kick, but even Pickle's body couldn't withstand it. However, what was even more surprising was still to come. Pickle struggled to get up but fell down again due to a strong dizziness after just a few steps. Seeing this, Retsu finally saw the clues. The reason for all this was that Pickle's body was different from ordinary people. In the ancient battles, Pickle's opponents were various fierce beasts. Their way of exerting force was always linear, and Pickle had adapted to this power in the process of constant fighting, evolving an unusually thick neck to withstand external impacts. This also explained why Pickle even forced Yujiro to use force dispersion techniques in their clash. But now, with his cunning brain fully engaged, Baki had long seen through Pickle's advantage, so he decisively chose a new way to attack. By only touching the surface of the skin, the force unleashed during the punch hit Pickle's face at an oblique angle. The sudden impact caused the opponent's brain to shake violently. The intense dizziness it created made even Pickle have no choice but to fall. After a long time, Pickle finally came to and saw Baki, who looked like the Grim Reaper, and for the first time, fear appeared in Pickle's heart. Since he had memories, he had been the absolute ruler of the ancient world, and no creature could make him unable to stand. But now, this shorter counterpart in front of him had done it, so it was time for a life and death duel. As the absolute ruler of the ancient era, after coming to modern society, having defeated absolute powerhouses like Retsu and Super Kureha, Pickle's strength is beyond doubt. But now, his undefeated myth has developed a crack in Baki's hands. The fight is not over yet. Even though Pickle is scared and trembling, the pride of a strong fighter does not allow him to flee. Baki decides to use a secret technique he has never used before, determined to defeat Pickle completely at this moment. The next second, Baki imagines his body shimmering like water, then slowly turns around and with a powerful slap, hits Pickle. Instantly, a thunderous roar is heard, and that deep, soul-piercing pain sweeps through Pickle's brain. Pickle falls to the ground, howling in pain. Obviously, he didn't expect this slap to be so terrifying. Little did he know, this was the Lightning 5 whip technique. Looking at the clear blood-red handprint on Pickle's back, the three people at the side of the ring involuntarily gasped in shock. But do you think it's over? Baki uses the same trick again, starting to shake his body. Then he suddenly springs up, delivering a whip kick straight to Pickle's groin. Taking advantage of Pickle's moment of pain, he backhands another slap onto his opponent's back. After being severely injured 3 times in a row, the primitive man takes a defensive stance for the first time. Moments later, a fire of anger rushes to his brain, and the murderous intent in Pickle's eyes is visibly intense. He then slowly lies down on the ground in front of everyone. Seeing this all too familiar posture, Retsu's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He was instantly killed by this move initially, and now Pickle is using this trump card again. Can Baki withstand this attack? The next second, a shocking scene occurs. Baki slowly raises his hands, finally posing like a fierce tiger lunging forward. Seeing this, Li Wine at the side is stunned. Isn't this the tiger style from ancient Chinese martial arts? But while tiger style is powerful, relying on it alone to defeat Pickle is obviously not enough. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. Baki then slightly smiles and leaps into the air. In mid-air, he poses again, this time in the starting position of Eagle Claw Fist. And that's not all. The Praying Mantis Fist, Monkey Fist, and Bear Paw Fist follow one after another, all rapidly mimicked by Baki using his cunning brain. Even Retsu has to admit he is inferior to Baki's martial arts talent. But even so, to Pickle, the fierce beasts that Baki simulates, even if truly reborn before him, would only end up as his prey, unless Baki's cunning brain can simulate ancient beasts strong enough to compete with Pickle. And the next second, Baki proves everything with his actions. He looks up to the sky, fists clenched, emitting a very terrifying oppressive aura. Moments later, a giant monster's phantom looms behind Baki. Almost at the same moment the phantom appears, Pickle is stunned in place. This is the prehistoric monster Triceratops. Seeing this old opponent he fought countless times in ancient times, Pickle knows how strong the Triceratops is, but he can't understand why such prehistoric monster power would appear in a small human. The three at the side are equally baffled. Now, with the power of his cunning brain, Baki's imagination has been amplified more than 100 times over ordinary people. Retsu's guess is entirely correct, but the Triceratops fist is far from Baki's final move. The next second, Baki leaps into the air again, arms extended, and a sharp screeching cuts through the sky. This is the ancient sky ruler, the Pteranodon. Before people can react, another deafening howl echoes through the skies. At this moment, Pickle's mouth is agape with shock. Even the Tyrannosaurus has been summoned. What kind of monster is Baki, able to simulate 7 kinds of fierce beasts in one breath? The next second, a scene that leaves everyone speechless appears. Baki merges the phantoms of the 7 beasts. Finally, he transforms into a never-before-seen super monster, possessing the teeth and tail of a Tyrannosaurus. It has the horns and limbs of a Triceratops, and even the wings and talons of a Pteranodon. This is the new species Baki has created by merging 7 fierce beasts through the power of his cunning brain. At this moment, Pickle is completely stunned. Triceratops, Pteranodon, Tyrannosaurus. Each one a dominant force in its own right, and now they are fused together. Charging at him, it's terrifying. This unprecedented oppressive feeling leaves Pickle at a loss for how to respond. With just one strike, Baki's hands, like the teeth of a Tyrannosaurus, firmly wrap around Pickle's arms. Then, using the momentum, he uses his full body strength to fling Pickle away like trash. Instantly, a piercing pain spreads from his arm, and at one point, Pickle feels as if his arm has been bitten off by the Tyrannosaurus. With this successful move, Baki doesn't give Pickle any chance to breathe. With unmatched momentum, he charges directly at Pickle. Seeing this, Retsu exclaims that it's too reckless. Hasn't Baki realized that Pickle's greatest advantage is in pure strength battles? Seeing his opponent choose to confront him head-on in his own domain boosts Pickle's confidence immensely. Leaping up, he uses the wall to assume a powering-up stance. In the ancient times, Pickle used this posture to compete with the Triceratops, which weighed tens of tons. With just one encounter, the 200-pound Pickle is thrown like a kite with its string cut, landing in the spectator seats. Such a terrifying scene leaves the 3 people at the side full of surprise. Unknowingly, the terrifying individual is no longer Pickle, but this 18-year-old youth, Baki. But why is it Pickle who is thrown out, not Baki? That kind of terrifying impact force is something not even a Triceratops might withstand. The reason is simple. Just like a bullet changes its trajectory due to the internal structure of the body when it enters, the stronger the linear impact force, the greater the influence from perpendicular directions. While everyone is talking, Baki's action becomes the last straw that breaks the camel's back. This time, Pickle's eyes are completely filled with killing intent. Pickle is very angry, and the consequences are severe. In any era, using urine to claim territory is an unchanging rule of the animal world. And now, this is akin to crushing Pickle's pride. Seeing Pickle completely consumed by rage, Baki is quite pleased with his own actions. He even boldly claims that what just happened was merely his warm-up exercise. Now, he will confront Pickle again, this time as a human. Pickle's rage explodes in an instant, and that terrifying force seems like it could crush Baki's head in the next second. Now, the only thought in Baki's mind is that Pickle is too strong. It's hard to imagine what kind of scene it would be if this monster met Oliva, known for his strength. Their battle would surely be called the ultimate showdown of strength. And then there's Hanayama. I wonder if his strength could defeat Pickle. And there's also his father, Yujiro, the man known as the strongest creature on the surface of the earth. Even his fighting stance is identical to Pickle's, as if they were born archenemies. Compared to Pickle's pure strength, Yujiro's strength is thorough and utterly without weakness. So then, why does he still so desperately want to defeat Pickle? Is it just to prove to that man that he's worthy of challenging him? Yujiro killed Baki's mother, so Baki should be filled with hatred for Yujiro. This is also the reason he has been chasing Yujiro's shadow for the past 18 years. But why is it that when Baki thinks of his father, his heart fills with longing? Even when facing Pickle's storm of attacks, he unconsciously imagines his opponent as Yujiro. Unknowingly, Baki's brain enters a strange state. His body seems to have its own consciousness, dodging all of Pickle's attacks with ease. Gradually, Pickle also notices something is off. He has seen many incredibly fast animals before, but they are not on the same level as Baki. Even more bizarre is when Baki charges at Pickle, he actually passes directly through his body. Despite being subjected to Pickle's frenzied kicks, Baki, far from being angry, actually seems to enjoy the beating. No matter how fierce Pickle's attacks, Baki's body seems to dodge effortlessly as if it has its own consciousness. Is this the power of the total self-awareness technique? Pickle is stunned, his thoughts suddenly pulled back to the ancient times. And he remembers that tiny creature, no bigger than a thumb, yet with astonishing speed. At that time, no matter how much force little Pickle exerted, he could never touch it. And now, isn't Baki in this fight just like that creature? Thinking this, Pickle is shocked and instinctively starts to retreat, trying to get away from Baki, this monster. Seeing this, Retsu falls into deep thought. Clearly, even he has to marvel at Baki's rapid growth. Could he perform such exquisite movements himself? One thing Retsu is sure of is that Baki has far surpassed him. The fight in the arena continues. Baki takes advantage of a gap in Pickle's attack, winding up his right fist and smashing it hard into Pickle's groin. In an instant, Pickle is completely stunned. That deep, soul-penetrating pain doesn't hit the brain immediately. Just like how there's a brief moment when you stub your toe and don't feel anything, this is the last moment of respite given by the gods. After this time passes, the real pain will arrive. The next second, Pickle is rolling on the ground, clutching his groin, his face twisted and deformed by the pain. Tokugawa doesn't understand why this ordinary attack, even on Pickle's robust body. Just when Tokugawa thinks this great battle is about to end, Retsu and Hanayama unanimously say it's not over yet. If someone attacked your groin so viciously, the normal response would be to retaliate with an equal blow after recovering, to vent your anger. Pickle's expression has already determined this. The Pickle who stands up again is completely different from before. Now, he is not a primitive man from ancient times, but a demon about to tear Baki apart. His full fury erupts in an instant, and a powerful, suffocating oppressive force rushes forward. The next second, Pickle's muscles start to grow wildly at a visible rate. At this moment, his muscles, now twice as large, stretch the scars on his body deeply. Seeing this, even Baki can't help but be shocked. There are similar scars on both his chest and back, clearly caused by wounds from prehistoric monsters. This is exactly the mark left by Pickle's battle with the Tyrannosaurus. It's shocking that Pickle could survive from the jaws of a Tyrannosaurus. In respect of this impressive record, the three spontaneously applaud. Meanwhile, Pickle's evolution continues. The sudden swelling of his muscles makes his face become fierce. His huge palms also distort and deform due to the growth of his bones. Finally, they transform into claws, just like those of a Tyrannosaurus. In this final form, Pickle, like a humanoid monster, lets out a war cry at Baki. Seemingly sensing the challenge in Baki's eyes, Pickle doesn't waste words and gathers all his strength for a punch. This punch sends Baki flying dozens of meters before he barely stops. Before Baki can catch his breath, Pickle's figure appears again like a specter. Then he swings his right fist. At the critical moment, Baki leaps up, both legs powering up, and kicks hard at Pickle's arm. At the moment of collision, a bizarre scene occurs. Pickle's killer punch, containing all his strength, surprisingly misses, and Baki, standing unharmed at his original spot, shows the power of technique. Although his physical toughness boasts almost supernatural muscles, humanity has evolved modern fighting techniques to unprecedented heights over the eons. So even when facing a primitive man who holds an absolute advantage in strength, Baki's counterattack is very composed, effortlessly blocking Pickle's hammer blow and retaliating with a heavy punch, following up with his signature high kick. After being severely hit twice in a row, the primitive man Pickle is finally beaten until blood spurts wildly. Just when everyone thinks the battle is decided, a sudden change occurs in the arena. The primitive man Pickle actually sheds tears, because in his fight with Baki, he realizes that this small-statured human is just as desperate to win as he is. The death of his mother became Baki's sole motivation to keep getting stronger, to defeat his father, Yujiro. Baki has endured unimaginable pain and training. Countless battles on the edge of life and death have forged this young man's unprecedented courage. The primitive man Pickle engaged in life and death battles with ancient beasts during countless days and nights in the distant Cretaceous period. Coming to modern society, he successively fought against strong opponents like Retsu, Katsumi, and Jack. They are also the reason he continues to fight, perhaps due to a mutual respect among the strong. Pickle, with an overwhelming momentum, struck directly at his opponent. Seeing Pickle's attack rapidly approaching, Baki froze at the crucial moment. What should he use to respond to Pickle's respect? The next second, a powerful heavy punch was thrown, and Baki's body began to counterattack uncontrollably. At that moment, Baki didn't need to defend or dodge. His body's own consciousness could make the most accurate counterattack. Pickle's heavy punches fell again and again but missed every time. The more Baki fought, the more excited he became, while Pickle gradually fell into panic. The former Pickle, with his strength, was unrivaled in the ancient times. Whether it was the ferocious Tyrannosaurus or the tough Triceratops, all were stepping stones on his path to becoming the strongest. But now, the strongest version of himself was pushed to the brink. Physical advantages were useless, and the power was ineffective. And all this was simply because of technique. In an instant, frustration, anger, and despair flooded his mind. Finally, all these feelings turned into deep fear. The next second, Pickle abandoned his attack and started to flee frantically, using the walls to aid his escape. But unexpectedly, Baki chased after Pickle with a barrage of attacks. Finally, Pickle's body couldn't take any more and he fell to the ground. This battle of the centuries seemed to be coming to an end at this moment. But Baki, with the upper hand, started to make his move. He walked slowly towards Pickle and issued the final challenge. Baki decided to determine the winner with strength at the last moment, a move that was utterly ruthless. The already despairing Pickle burst out with great fighting power once again. Just one collision revealed the gap in strength with Baki. His badly injured body fell slowly through the air. Pickle took the opportunity to tightly grab Baki's arm. The next second, a shocking scene occurred. Pickle, in a contest of strength, used technique to twist Baki's arm into a twist. In an instant, Baki fell to the ground, unconscious. No one expected the battle to end this way. Pickle sat at the original spot with a forlorn look. This time, he didn't immediately consume his opponent. Perhaps he knew that if the opponent hadn't changed the fighting style at the last moment, he would have been the one to fail. And so, the ancient modern battle spanning 200 million years came to an end with Pickle's victory. Meanwhile, the three spectators each expressed their opinions about the battle. In Retsu's view, it's a case of the victor being king. Pickle broke through at the last moment and used technique to counterattack Baki, making him the undeniable winner. But Hanayama had a different opinion. If Baki hadn't changed his tactics, Pickle would have been defeated long ago. Moreover, technique is a weapon used by the weaker to compete with the stronger, and Pickle, with his unparalleled strength, using technique to win by luck is an insult to the strong. So, in Hanayama's view, Baki is the true victor of this fight. After a long while, Pickle slowly stood up. He looked at the teeth and shattered bones buried under the sand in the arena, lost in thought. These are the marks left by the strong who fought here with all they had, pursuing victory. And now, he used technique on the same land to defeat his opponent. Is this victory really what he wanted? Pickle left the arena in melancholy, going alone to his favorite place since awakening. The breathtaking view from the 100-meter-high rooftop was unobstructed. Just as Pickle felt utterly dejected, Baki, who had escaped from the hospital, found him. This time, the two did not fight but sat together quietly, overlooking this bustling world like longtime friends. At this moment, Baki began to imagine. He saw the beautiful Cretaceous period landscapes in his mind. That was where Pickle lived, and surely he must miss it now. Do you know how difficult it is to become the president of a country? Getting the votes of the people is just the qualification to enter the door, but the hardest part is getting Yujiro's approval. At this time, George, who had just won the election to become the next president, found Yujiro Hanma before he even had time for his inaugural speech. As the nation's highest leader, George's primary task was to solemnly swear to Yujiro to make a friendly pact never to be enemies with the strongest creature on Earth, and to respect and allow all of Yujiro's actions in his country, unconstrained. After doing everything, George waited for Yujiro's response. Moments later, Yujiro showed an impatient expression, but since the other party was the new president, Yujiro would still give the due respect. Having gained the approval of the strongest man on Earth, George instantly became an admiring fanboy and bravely requested to experience Yujiro's nuclear-like iron fist. The next second, Yujiro clenched his fist with one hand, then gently slid it across the glass table, accompanied by a series of ear-piercing screeches. The military-grade bulletproof glass was effortlessly sliced through like tofu. Seeing this, George's heart was overwhelmed by a storm. He finally believed the rumors that Yujiro could destroy anything with his bare hands were absolutely true. The next day, under special authorization from the national president, Yujiro entered the most terrifying prison easily and without any issues. Perhaps it was because Baki lost to Pickle by a single move. At that time, Yujiro, under the guise of reminiscing, actually wanted to find a punching bag to vent his frustration. Thinking it over, only Oliva had the qualifications to do this. Sensing Yujiro's true intentions, Oliva wasn't intimidated. He slowly took off his shirt, ready for a big fight. And so, the battle between the two was about to erupt. Oliva was the first to strike, throwing a powerful punch. Faced with Oliva's fierce offensive, Yujiro stood very calmly in place. The next second, with a clang, Yujiro's iron fist, like a weight, deformed Oliva's face and finally smashed him heavily into a pile of books. The severely injured Oliva slowly got up, ready to fight with strength. The two men, both possessing top-tier strength, interlocked their fingers. Whoever's fist is forced lower than the other's first is the loser. The next second, both men exerted force simultaneously, and Yujiro's iron fist almost instantly broke through the knuckle guards. In just 3 seconds, Oliva, known as the strongest man in America, was mercilessly defeated by Yujiro in seconds. At the same time, in Tokyo's cabinet, a secret meeting about Pickle's fate was being held. Pickle's strength had surpassed what humans could understand, and living in the same world as such a prehistoric monster inevitably made people fearful. But some believed that Pickle's existence had immeasurable social value and was key to exploring human history. Thus, whether to keep Pickle in modern society or reseal him became a hot topic worldwide. After deliberation, the United Nations decided to hold a global referendum to determine Pickle's fate. A total of 1 billion people participated in this vote, and by a margin of 1,000 votes, the decision was made to reseal Pickle. But sadly, such a conclusion was like a fantasy to Pickle. How could the strongest prehistoric human possibly be confined by a mere door? After escaping the laboratory, Pickle took the Tyrannosaurus Rex head he had captured as a gift for the professor. This was the purest gift from a primitive man, to thank the professor and the general for bringing him so many strong opponents during this time. After everything, Pickle leaped into the air, and his huge figure soon disappeared into the night. And so, Pickle's story comes to a temporary close. On the other side, the genius Dr. Kohukaguki took Baki for a full-body checkup. In his view, after a fierce battle with a prehistoric monster, even the strongest body might have hidden injuries. However, when the test results came out, not only was there nothing wrong with Baki's body, but his brain scan made Kohukaguki completely question life. He immediately found a brain specialist, but even he was startled upon seeing Baki's brain. This isn't a human brain at all, it's clearly the face of a demon. Now, after the battle with Pickle, Baki's ghost brain had undergone a second evolution. Everywhere he passed, within 100 meters, rats, as if sensing unprecedented fear, were fleeing en masse. However, even Baki, with his powerful ghost brain, could only surrender meekly when facing Koju. That morning, Baki, biting on toast, was ready to go to class, only to bump into his ex-girlfriend Koju. For a moment, sweet memories of the past flooded his mind. 6 months ago, they were involved in a love triangle with the son of a boxing champion. Although Baki defeated him squarely, he also chose to let go because of that. The defeated boy hid backstage after the match, crying his eyes out. Luckily, Koju was there to offer some comfort to this grown boy. Tears soaked Koju's dress, but she didn't mind at all. Just when Eli Jr. thought he was about to succeed, Koju's answer was just 2 short words: loved once. Yes, Koju had loved Eli Jr., but that kind of love was more like maternal affection. Koju's words once again sent Eli Jr.'s mood plummeting. Perhaps the only one who could get Koju was Baki. From that day on, Eli Jr. left Koju. Half a year passed in a blink, and Baki and Koju met again. Although she was somewhat unhappy with Baki for giving up on her, Koju still pretended to be calm, saying she was quite happy growing up with Eli Jr. She thought her words would anger Baki, but instead, he said that happiness shared is happiness doubled. Growing up together is also a beautiful thing. Hearing this, Koju's face turned cold again, and she started punching and kicking Baki. Before long, Baki, bearing no grudges, took Koju's hand, and they went home together to continue growing. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Earth in a military base, research specifically aimed at the strongest creature was secretly underway. The general carefully placed a spoonful of explosives on top of a dagger, then used a microhammer to tap it slightly. The next second, the gunpowder immediately exploded violently. The general was quite satisfied with his invention. Just a few grams of gunpowder could produce such terrifying power. Undoubtedly, if the gunpowder filled an entire suit of armor, anyone who dared touch it would undoubtedly be blown up on the spot. And the opponent that made the general willing to use explosives to win was Yujiro Hanma. This was the agreement they made to maintain their friendship. The general must challenge Yujiro once a year. He confidently went to the designated place, this time fully confident he could take down Yujiro. Suddenly, a killing intent struck from behind. The general was so frightened he quickly pulled away. Seeing the other party arriving in armor that looked like scrap metal, Yujiro immediately burst into laughter, slapping his thigh. Suddenly, Yujiro threw a high kick, and the general was instantly stunned by this terrifying aura. Yujiro mocked him, saying he had scared him so much he wet his pants, which immediately ignited the general's rage. The general declared that it would take only one punch, and even if Yujiro was a demon, he would lose a layer of skin. But, to his utter surprise, just after the general finished his bold statement, his helmet flew off far away, and his specially made bomb-proof armor shattered at the sound. Seeing this, the general was dumbstruck. He could never have imagined that his pride, the armor, would be so easily destroyed in the eyes of Yujiro. Although Yujiro's words were devastating, the general had to admit he had no chance of winning. Thus, the general clenched his fists and chose to self-destruct. The next second, with a loud bang, his figure vanished amidst the fireworks. Switching scenes, poor Baki was targeted by a few thugs again, and his heart was filled with bitterness. He had lost count of how many times he had been robbed, and to think they were using such small knives. They really didn't see him as a threat at all. Just as Baki was about to teach the thugs a lesson, a familiar voice rang out. "Scram, or your fate will be to die right here," he said. Seeing someone intervene, the thugs decisively chose to flee. At this moment, Baki finally recognized the identity of this middle-aged man. He was the trusted butler of his late mother, and his purpose in coming here was to stop the upcoming father-son battle. He hoped Baki would reconsider his idea of fighting Yujiro. After all, Yujiro was known to be utterly merciless. Little did he know, in Baki's view, his mother would rather sacrifice her life for him, so how could he abandon his quest for vengeance? At this, Baki was moved to tears. He deeply bowed to the butler, thanking him for his long-term care, but this time, he had to be a rebellious youth. For his mother, he had to challenge Yujiro Hanma. Meanwhile, Tokugawa, having heard the news, naturally wouldn't miss the opportunity to profit from the hype of the ultimate father-son battle. So, he secretly met with the newly appointed prime minister. The immense pressure made the high official somewhat stiff in body. Seeing the official's predicament, Tokugawa coughed slightly, and the next second, the door behind him slowly opened. Piles of cash directly stunned the official. A total of 300 kilograms of banknotes amounted to 3 billion Japanese yen, and this was the first gift Tokugawa gave him. Indeed, he was the man controlling the economic lifeline of the nation. With just a single move, he could ensure a person's lifetime of comfort. Tokugawa did this with a purpose. With Baki and Yujiro's father-son battle about to unfold, he had to clear all obstacles in advance to ensure everything proceeded smoothly. Soon after, a secret order was issued from the Japanese cabinet. The nation would adopt a neutral stance towards the Hanma father-son battle. However, when the message reached the Ministry of Defense, the Minister of Defense, upon hearing the name Hanma, broke into a cold sweat, as if remembering something terrifying. The others couldn't understand. It was just a duel between two martial artists. What was there to fear? The Minister of Defense didn't argue but slowly revealed a state secret known to only a few. A few years ago, a mysterious phone call came directly to the Prime Minister's office, claiming there would be an attack on the presidential residence. For safety, the military immediately surrounded the presidential residence. Even so, they were effortlessly breached by that man. From that day, this man named Yujiro Hanma became recognized as the strongest in the entire nation. Hearing this, disbelief was evident. No matter how powerful a human is, it's still just one person. To use a long-range sniper rifle for assassination would be impossible unless the person was not human but a demon. Otherwise, survival would be impossible. The Minister of Defense just smiled bitterly. Even the fastest bullet could be caught by hand by him. Perhaps only a nuclear missile could kill Yujiro. But using such a weapon would severely impact the entire country. So, destroying Yujiro is absolutely impossible, which is why every new president's first task is to sign a peace treaty with Yujiro Hama alone, because they know this man has the power to shake the world order. But now, Yujiro Hama's position had been slightly shaken. Meanwhile, Baki, in preparation for his ultimate battle with Yujiro, started training non-stop, sweating profusely in the training room. After his battle with Pickle, Baki's ghost brain underwent a second evolution. Now, he could finally simulate Yujiro Hama's body, though it was still far from pure enough. But even the current level exhausted more than half of Baki's stamina. This showed just how terrifying the strength of the strongest creature was. As Yujiro's phantom gradually materialized, Baki also began to get excited. The next second, a fist as big as a sandbag, with unmatched momentum, charged directly at Baki. In a critical moment, Baki roared and threw a punch in retaliation. The next moment, with a thunderous roar, the area within 100 meters shook violently as if struck by an earthquake. After everything calmed down, Baki's body was sent flying by this powerful force. Even facing an incomplete Yujiro Hama, Baki was defeated again. That day, Yujiro and Tokugawa discussed the details of the father-son battle together. As they talked, Yuichiro noticed that Tokugawa's complexion was off, so he asked if he had checked his health recently. Such an unthinkable situation plunged Tokugawa into deep thought. Yujiro quickly said it was just small talk and nothing serious. At that, Tokugawa exploded on the spot. "You're Yujiro Hanma, since when do you care about someone else's health?" Unexpectedly, Tokugawa's outburst caused a sweet taste to surge up from deep within his throat, followed by a gush of blood. Now completely panicked, Tokugawa accused Yujiro of poisoning him, then collapsed in front of Yujiro. In reality, Yujiro hadn't done anything. It was because his eyes possessed a superpower. Anyone in front of Yujiro, with just a casual glance, could have their bodies scanned like an X-ray machine, memorizing every disease and ailment. Even recently mutated cancer cells couldn't escape Yujiro's gaze, compared to top domestic and international doctors who rely on various precise instruments to diagnose. This man, with no weaknesses in his body, could find everyone's vulnerabilities with just his eyes, even more accurately than any instrument. Such a terrifying ability in one person. Is this luck or misfortune? Meanwhile, to prepare for the upcoming father-son battle, Baki decided to meet with Yujiro for a good talk beforehand. So, he approached his father's friend and laid out his thoughts. The general was surprised. Baki thought, "Isn't it just a father and son having a meal? Why such a big reaction?" The general couldn't help but curse. "Don't play dumb. You know this is impossible." Indeed, one mountain cannot house two tigers. The strength of the Hama father and son doesn't allow them to live like ordinary people. Baki understood this, but as a son, he couldn't help but wish to have a meal cooked by his father. Soon after, Tokugawa woke up in the hospital. The genius Dr. Kohukaguki wanted to tell him the specifics of his condition, but Tokugawa didn't care about that. He was only concerned with the Hama father-son battle proceeding as soon as possible. Unfortunately, not everyone felt the same way. That night, a special plane flew directly to a military base in Tokyo, and the person on the plane was the newly elected President George of the United States. All the Japanese officials looked on with anticipation and anxiety. This was George's first diplomatic visit since taking office, and the Japanese side was also very curious about the real purpose of his visit. Sure enough, once George learned about Japan's neutral stance on the father-son battle, he immediately stated that the US decided to intervene. Hearing this, the Prime Minister of Japan was very puzzled. Yujiro Hama's strength is enough to shake the security of a nation. Moreover, his son Hama Baki is also close to this level. What right does the US have to intervene in their fight? George said, "It's because Yujiro Hama will do things for me." George took out the carbon powder that Yujiro had crushed to show his grip strength and proudly displayed it to the Japanese side. Outside the conference room at that time, 3 US Special Forces soldiers were kneeling on the ground. Clearly, all of this was Yujiro Hama's masterpiece. The arrival of the strongest creature on Earth made them feel like they were facing a great enemy, especially George, who was trembling with fear, afraid that the other party might destroy him if displeased. Then Yujiro grabbed the bottle of carbon powder and crushed it directly under the shocked eyes of everyone. He told George to stretch out his hand. George was very afraid but had to obey. As the powder slowly fell in George's hand, it formed a cross shape. Yujiro said, "You once held the Bible and swore to me. Now say it again in front of God." Everyone present, including George, felt incredibly suffocated by Yujiro's terrifying aura. The next second, George suppressed his inner fear and reread the oath in front of everyone. I will form a friendly pact with Yujiro Hanma and respect and not interfere with any of his actions. As soon as these words fell, Yujiro asked, "So, by interfering in our father-son fight, are you declaring war on the Hanma family?" George knew what offending Yujiro would result in and decisively chose survival over dignity. George stated, "The conflict between you and your son is like a conflict between nations and could even trigger a war, so we had no choice but to intervene." Yujiro didn't want to argue with them and finally said, "Don't enter my line of sight, or bear all the consequences yourself." After ending the farce, Yujiro and his friend agreed to dine together. As usual, the general informed Yujiro of the latest intelligence on Baki. Unexpectedly, when he heard that Baki wanted him to cook, Yujiro's utensils instantly turned into scrap metal. But then, after thinking it over, a father cooking for his son didn't seem so hard to accept. At that time, in Baki's private training room, he had lost count of how many times he had collapsed from exhaustion. Every time he fought against his imagined father, Baki was undoubtedly defeated. Fortunately, there was still time before the father-son battle. As long as he didn't give up, there was still hope. As the saying goes, 3 parts training, 7 parts eating. After each training session, the Yujiro Hanma simulated by Baki's ghost brain would personally cook a delicious meal for his son. Unexpectedly, Baki boasted about the food while also complaining that Yujiro's cooking skills needed improvement. Hearing this, Yujiro immediately flipped the table, ready to fight. In a critical moment, Baki leaped into the air to dodge the attack, landing in a battle-ready stance. Clearly, Baki was used to these impromptu father-son battles, but he never expected Koju to find him at this moment. Koju felt lost from not seeing her lover for a long time and even thought Baki was hiding another woman at home. To this, Baki confidently said there was no better woman in the world than Koju. Then, Baki pulled Koju along for a joyful growth together. After growing with Koju again, Baki's progress accelerated, but he knew defeating Yujiro was still far off, so he again used the ghost brain to simulate another king of the insect world, the cockroach. Although the cockroach is one of the weakest in attack in the insect world, its speed is definitely among the fastest, compared to animals like the cheetah, which need to keep running to maximize their speed. A cockroach can accelerate to 270 kilometers per hour in just 0.01 seconds. If a human body tried to run at this speed, the immense pressure would instantly tear the muscles and lead to death. So a normal human body can't reach the speed of a cockroach. When Baki saw a dead cockroach crushed underfoot, he had an epiphany. The ultimate speed of a cockroach is not due to muscles but a milky white fluid throughout its body. So, if he imagined himself as a liquid, could he reach the ultimate speed? With this thought, Baki began his rigorous training, and after a while, he successfully imagined himself as a puddle of liquid. The next second, a powerful punch was thrown, and as his body surged forward, a figure made of sweat stood in place. With sweat falling to the ground, Baki knew no one could surpass his speed now. The world-shaking father-son battle was about to begin. As one of the protagonists, Baki was not training as usual but was brewing coffee, waiting for an honored guest. Suddenly, Baki felt a massive killing intent rapidly approaching. The strongest creature on Earth, Yujiro Hanma, had appeared behind Baki without notice. His cold eyes, like those of a venomous snake, were staring at him. Seeing the atmosphere turn awkward, Baki immediately poured his father a cup of hand-ground coffee. Yujiro didn't speak, raised the cup, and drank it all. Then he casually asked Baki, "Is this why you called me here?" Baki didn't answer, just worried that his father might flip the table again. Then Yujiro continued to ask, "Are you afraid when you face your father?" Baki honestly said, "Afraid? Of course, I'm afraid. There's not a second I'm not afraid of you, but besides fear, I also feel envy and hatred towards you." Hearing the word hatred, Yujiro asked, "Then why don't you just take action?" Little did Baki know that the hatred between the two of them would be resolved on the day of the father-son battle. But for the rest of the time, Baki still hopes to get along well with Yujiro. However, facing Baki's show of weakness, Yujiro seemed intent on provoking a conflict, saying, "What do you mean by giving me such terrible coffee?" As he spoke, Yujiro's hair bristled as if he was about to flip the table and start a fight the next second. Faced with his father's unreasonable fault-finding, Baki's action completely dumbfounded Yujiro. He knelt down on the ground and sincerely apologized to Yujiro. Instantly, Yujiro's mind went blank. Wasn't this clearly denying him the chance to lose his temper? However, Baki spoke the truth. This coffee shouldn't be that bad, right? Otherwise, You wouldn't have drunk at all." As soon as these words came out, Yujiro's mouth twisted in anger. Indeed, how could someone like him, who starts fighting at the drop of a hat, possibly win an argument against Baki? The next second, Baki unexpectedly asked Yujiro to make him a cup of coffee. Hearing this, Yujiro shot up and then casually picked up the table, breaking it in half as easily as tearing paper in front of Baki. The only way to drink Yujiro's coffee is to continuously beat and torture him with your strength. Then command him to make coffee for you, and tell him if he doesn't comply, his fate will be the same as the table's. So, Baki, do you still want to drink coffee now? After the coffee agreement with Yujiro, the tense father-son relationship finally eased for once. One day, as usual, Baki went out to shop, but he didn't expect to be targeted by a man covered in tattoos just as he left the house. "Fight me, Baki," the man said, leaving Baki stunned. "Fight as soon as we meet?" This man was Baki's friend Shiharu Shiba. Shiharu suddenly exploded and took the initiative, delivering a powerful punch to Baki. However, such an attack was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot in front of the greatly improved Baki. With a casual wave of his hand, Baki sent Shiharu flying several meters away. Shiharu got up again, still taunting, "Baki, your attack is too gentle. This level of strength deserves the title of the strongest young man on Earth." Little did he know that Baki had used only a fraction of his strength with that casual punch. Shiharu was immediately infuriated, and the next second, he leaped into the air, a fierce kick aimed directly at Baki's face. "Too slow, way too slow," Baki said as he dodged the attack and instantly appeared in front of Shiharu. Before Shiharu could react, he was thrown by Baki in all directions. Baki intended to end this farce, but Shiharu, like an indestructible cockroach, swung his right fist and charged straight at Baki again. In a critical moment, Baki did not dodge or avoid, letting Shiharu's Shoryuken attack him. He thought this ultimate move, even if it couldn't defeat Baki, would surely cause him some damage, but to his utter surprise, at the moment of collision, Shiharu's fingers, like being placed on a solid weight, all 5 fingers suffered comminuted fractures. Shiharu's body was smashed to the ground by Baki again. After doing all this, Baki prepared to leave as if nothing had happened, but unexpectedly, Shiharu got up again, and this time he planned to use his trump card, the golden finger. Baki immediately became excited. He also wanted to see what kind of power this miraculous finger technique had. The next second, Baki put his full strength into a burst charge, and his whole person disappeared instantly. In an instant, Shiharu only felt a blur flash before his eyes. Turning his head, Baki had already appeared more than 10 meters away. Even more bizarrely, his own left hand had suffered a comminuted fracture. At that moment, large sweat drops slid down Shiharu's face. He couldn't believe that Baki had just countered his finger with his soft eyes. Yujiro Hama also has a day of romance, and even more bizarrely, his love interest is Baki. As soon as this was said, Dappo on the side was immediately shocked. Yujiro stated that he had been waiting for this day for too long. The seed he patiently cultivated has finally grown and bared its fangs at him. Whenever he noticed, the shadow of Baki Hama would appear in Yujiro's mind, lingering like the feeling of being in love. Hearing Yujiro's explanation, Dappo finally sighed in relief. Yujiro broke open a bottle of wine and slowly poured himself a glass. He then began to tell Dappo about a dream he once had. In the dream, Baki surpassed him to become the new strongest being on Earth. Dappo's face was full of disbelief. Can Baki do it? After speaking, Yujiro raised his glass and drank the wine in one gulp. It's a dream because it can't be done, he said. On the other side, after the battle between Baki and Shiharu, not only did Baki greatly improve his mental state, but he also comprehended a new martial arts secret, the Cockroach thrust. This move harms the enemy as well as himself, but it might be effective in the father-son battle. At that time, Shiharu reported the battle situation to Hanayama. When he learned that Baki had used his eyes to withstand the fingers, causing Shiharu's hands to suffer comminuted fractures, Hanayama was somewhat incredulous. He suspected that Shiharu, because of the disgraceful defeat to Baki, deliberately told such a huge lie to fool him. Shiharu hurriedly explained that it wasn't because he was weak, but because Baki's speed was too fast. With the father-son battle date approaching, Baki found Tokugawa and asked for his help. However, Tokugawa didn't want to help. One reason was that their two powers were strong, and no one could stop them. Another reason was that he was counting on the two of them fighting to make money. Little did he know, Baki's idea was simple. He hoped that all civilians would be prohibited from watching the father-son battle the day to avoid accidental injuries. Hearing this simple request, Tokugawa immediately agreed. Who would have thought that a simple meal between the Hama father and son would cause all the police in Japan to mobilize? Even the US Special Forces were on high alert, with their commanders stating outright that this would be a war. Lacking fatherly love, Baki always had a wish in his heart to share familial joys with his father. Today, Baki made a lavish meal by hand, all to welcome the arrival of Yujiro Hanma. The next second, a sense of oppression suddenly hit, and Baki turned his head to see Yujiro staring intently at him. A moment later, something astonishing happened. Yujiro, like a normal person, said, "Let's eat." Baki stood there in shock. In his mind, Yujiro had always been the epitome of brutality and wildness. Aside from having a human appearance, everything he did seemed as savage as a beast's. But now, the father was eating with chopsticks like everyone else, chewing his food slowly. Was this Yujiro still the strongest creature Baki knew? While Baki was distracted, Yujiro casually reminded him to eat more vegetables for nutrition. This sudden concern startled Baki, who quickly obediently responded, "Yes, father." Soon, the delicacies on the dining table were completely devoured by the father and son. At that moment, a bold idea suddenly flashed through Baki's mind. I wonder what the strongest creature on Earth looks like when washing dishes. With immense psychological pressure, Baki voiced his thoughts, but thinking of Yujiro, who could fly into a rage at any moment, his words became weaker as they reached his lips. After a long wait, Baki tentatively turned back, only to find Yujiro standing behind him with his fists clenched. "If you want me to wash the dishes, you have to beat me in rock paper scissors," Yujiro said. Baki finally breathed a sigh of relief. And even luckier, the goddess of victory was on his side. Baki thought he could smoothly see Yujiro wash the dishes, but the next second, Yujiro suddenly exerted force and clamped Baki's fist tightly with 2 fingers. In an instant, Baki felt as if his fist was about to split open. Soon, Yujiro forcefully turned it into paper, thus unethically completing the reversal. After everything, he swaggered out, not forgetting to give his son another lesson before leaving. "Remember, there are scissors in this world that can cut through rock." As a reward, Yujiro invited Baki to dine in a 5-star hotel. Baki was stunned as soon as he entered. The luxurious decor, expensive prices, and countless top-tier red wines felt like a dream to him. Then, led by the waiter, Baki arrived at his father's exclusive presidential suite. From here, there was no obstruction, and it felt like the whole of Tokyo was at his feet, making his own living space seem worse than a doghouse by comparison. Just as Baki was still lost in shock, Yujiro, dressed in full regalia, finally arrived fashionably late. But when he saw Baki's shabby clothes, bought from who knows where, Yujiro disdainfully said, "Next time you come to a place this upscale, could you at least wear a pair of socks?" Baki admitted his mistake while saying, "You never taught me." Hearing Baki actually push the responsibility onto him, Yujiro's anger flared up. Baki continued, "From childhood to adulthood, besides forcing me to keep getting stronger, you never taught me anything, so isn't this your responsibility?" Knowing he was at fault, Yujiro no longer argued with Baki. Yujiro was a worldly man, exuding an aristocratic air in every move. In contrast, Baki experienced a series of delicacies he had never seen before, leaving an indelible mark on his taste buds. After 3 rounds of drinks, Baki struggled for a long time but still decided to ask his father the question that had been hidden in his heart for many years. Why did he kill his own mother? As soon as these words came out, the temperature in the room instantly dropped to freezing. Clearly, Baki's words had touched Yujiro's raw nerve. Yujiro wasn't going to respond directly, but under Baki's relentless questioning, the extremely angry Yujiro moved. His palm smashed down on the table, and the terrifying force even shattered the room's load-bearing pillars. Seeing his father's emotions about to spiral out of control, Baki decided to go for broke and grabbed Yujiro's clothes with both hands, completely ignoring the presence of the waiter, and began to shake him wildly. Finally, Yujiro could no longer suppress the rage in his heart. The oppressive feeling that burst forth instantly swept through the entire room, even shattering the tempered glass 3 meters away. As Yujiro's aura grew stronger, the entire building began to shake violently as if hit by an earthquake. At the same time, Yujiro Hanma in the room finally moved. His single foot stomped down while his palm caught Baki's arm and flung him. Baki spun rapidly in the air like a top. After spinning, his body accurately landed in the chair. Before Baki could react, Yujiro stepped closer to him, putting all his strength into it. He smacked Baki's bottom with a slap. In an instant, Baki felt like he had been hit by a giant truck. Whoosh! His whole body smashed through the glass and flew out the window. In this critical moment, Baki managed to avoid a tragic fall by using his hands and feet. However, far from being scared, Baki was extremely excited about the upcoming fight. After all, he had been waiting for this father-son battle for a full 4 years. Yet Baki still underestimated Yujiro's strength. Just the immense oppressive aura emanating from him made him involuntarily think of running away. But under his father's intimidation, his stiff legs simply couldn't respond. The next second, Yujiro rushed forward and firmly grasped Baki's hand. His huge palm slapped down, and instantly, a piercing noise nearly burst people's eardrums within 100 meters centered on the suite. This shows just how powerful Yujiro's slap was. If it wasn't for Baki breaking free at the last moment, his palm would probably have been smashed into a pulp. At that time, Baki began to understand his father's attacks. Though each was ferocious, they all deliberately missed the vital spots. Clearly, Yujiro didn't consider this conflict a battle, but rather a lesson where a father disciplines his son. However, this method of teaching was just too brutal, treating his own son like a punching bag to be wildly battered. Another kick directly shattered the wall, leaving the bystanders in shock. To this, Yujiro simply said, "Sorry for interrupting your meal." Yujiro then slapped Baki across the face. Then, like picking up a small chicken, pressed Baki's head against the glass. As Yujiro's hand exerted more force, the tempered glass gradually shattered like tofu. Yujiro looked back at the onlookers with a smile, then took his son and leaped down from the 100-meter building. As the two plummeted through the air, a terrifying thought slowly emerged in Baki's mind. Could it be that his father intended to take them both out together? Although the acceleration from falling off a 100-meter high building would turn an ordinary person into mush. For Yujiro, it's just a piece of cake. Yujiro emerged from the dust like a demon, still holding Baki in his hand. The next second, Yujiro smiled smugly and threw his son out like trash. Watching Baki lying on the ground, Yujiro showed no mercy. Instead, his face was full of mockery as he scoffed at Baki for playing dead. Yujiro knew that with Baki's physical strength, it was impossible for him to lose consciousness from such an impact. Seeing his trick exposed by Yujiro on the spot, Baki decided to fully commit to his role as a dramatic actor. "Dad, give me a hand. I can't move," Baki said. Hearing this, Yujiro pondered for a moment but chose to believe Baki. But the moment their palms touched, Baki suddenly exerted force and gripped Yujiro tightly. Then, with a push from one foot, Baki slapped Yujiro across the face. This scene stunned the onlookers. Such father-son affection. Before Baki could react, a huge palm was already fanning towards him. With a loud, crisp sound, Baki finally understood the consequences of provoking Yujiro. His bones cracked painfully all over, and Baki fell to the ground, unconscious. The crowd hurried to call for help, not knowing that these people lost the courage to resist at the first sight of Yujiro. All scared out of their wits, Yujiro completely ignored these people, easily smashing through the tempered glass and walking straight towards Baki. Yujiro, utterly indifferent to his son's life or death, grabbed Baki's face tightly with his right hand. The next second, Baki was howling in pain, but Yujiro showed no sign of letting go. You should know that his fingers could easily crush cards, coins, and even sharp objects like steel nails. Unbelievable as it may seem, imagine the pain when such force is applied to a human face. Finally, Baki was enraged. He decided that now was the moment to battle Yujiro. But, unexpectedly, even the transformed Baki was no match for Yujiro. After 2 consecutive signature roundhouse kicks, Yujiro remained unmoved and easily countered them. Instead, Baki, who initiated the attack, was caught by his father. Then Yujiro slowly raised his fist and hammered it down on Baki's skull. In an instant, Baki felt his brain go blank, and his whole body nearly went into shock. But Yujiro had no intention of stopping. With one foot pressed down, he launched another powerful sweeping leg kick towards Baki. Although this attack avoided the vitals, the impact, like that of a heavy truck, made Baki realize he was as helpless as a baby in front of Yujiro. Kicked flying, Baki collapsed at the elevator entrance, gasping for breath. The pain that penetrated his bones swept over his body like a tide. Before Baki could get up, Yujiro easily reached the second floor. This terrifying scene shocked the Japanese officials watching, falling from 100 meters without a scratch, intimidating the mobile forces into fleeing. This man had long surpassed the realm of ordinary humans. Perhaps only Japan's most elite self-defense forces could stop this father-son battle. As the Japanese self-defense forces mobilized overnight, Yujiro also welcomed the most exciting moment of the night, although he had always disdained using whips, a technique for children. Now, Being able to directly escalate the level of pain became the best way to teach Baki. Seeing Yujiro not rely on the ghost brain, able to imagine his arms as whips, Baki was provoked by a strong desire to win. But the next second, when Yujiro's whip struck him, Baki was instantly dumbfounded by the pain. In a moment, heart-wrenching screams echoed through the entire mall. Unbelievable that he also had a day of rolling on the ground in unbearable pain. Baki had always been training himself in various ways, sweating profusely in training until exhaustion without a day of slack, plus countless life and death duels with opponents. Even Baki himself thought his body had reached a perfect state. But now, with Yujiro's whipping landing on him, 18 years of accumulated beliefs crumbled at this moment. The intense pain repeatedly assaulted him, and just as Baki caught his breath, Yujiro slightly smiled and raised his hand, slapping Baki again. This time, the familiar pain completely shattered Baki's remaining consciousness. His entire body was whooshed away dozens of meters in an instant. After being severely injured twice in a row, Baki gained a new understanding of pain. Yujiro's attacking force was no less than a steel whip slash. Even someone as strong as Baki could hardly withstand such attacks. Finally, driven to a corner, Baki completely ignited the ham of blood within. This time, he decided to return the favor to Yujiro in the same manner, but, unexpectedly, when he put all his strength into a whip strike, Yujiro's face immediately bulged with veins. Yujiro's whole body's veins contracted as he clenched his fist with the same force. With just these few simple steps, all the excruciating pain was dispersed. Here is the translation, capturing the essence and tone of the dramatic confrontation between Baki and Yujiro. The most critical thing is that since getting hurt, Yujiro hasn't even blinked. Baki stood frozen in place, dumbfounded. He couldn't imagine that the whipping that made him scream in pain just didn't hurt anymore. Yujiro couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. So dumb, you don't even aim for the vitals. He then posed, taunting Baki, "Come on, hit me back as if you're taking revenge." Just as the battle was about to erupt, the army self-defense forces, trying to stop the father-son fight, finally arrived. Baki clenched his fists and took a fighting stance, noticing to his surprise that his father Yujiro's hand was also open. Baki couldn't help but laugh inwardly at the stupidity, raising his foot, ready to attack. But the next second, he unexpectedly sensed something was off. It wasn't Baki's will choosing to fight, but the combat instinct triggered by Yujiro's oppressive aura. Seeing Baki finally understanding the situation, Yujiro showed a relieved smile. Yujiro mocked him, "You immature guy. Bet all you have and come at me." At this tense moment, someone suddenly shouted Baki's name. It was Tokugawa who had arrived. He told Baki, "Go all out without any reservations. Everyone around has been moved to safety." This support made Baki immensely grateful, and he immediately challenged Yujiro. A punch, fast as lightning, was about to hit Yujiro's face. But with a clang, Baki found himself embedded in the wall. Yujiro, pretending to be alarmed, said, "So useless." But Baki clearly knew what had happened just then. His punch, thrown with all his might, was easily read and blocked by Yujiro. Excitement written all over Baki's face. Truly worthy of being my father. But for Yujiro, not fighting with his real strength was an insult. He warned Baki this was the last time, or else he would strike back. This made Baki's heart tremble. The man before him was a victor of countless glorious battles. With one glance, he could see through all actions inside and out. While Baki was pondering, Yujiro suddenly started to cry. "Have you had enough fun? Let Dad see your strength. Come and hit me." He then thought to himself that he inherited his father's strongest DNA. The boy who was instantly killed had, through countless life and death duels, grown strong enough to make Yujiro take him seriously. Though already seen through, what did it matter? Baki slowly relaxed his body. Every muscle, organ, and cell inside his body seemed like water. Seeing this, Yujiro couldn't help but laugh. "This is the fight I wanted." Baki melted all his meridians into water, turned his consciousness into gas, and thus obtained the supreme transcendental power. Then, embodying a cockroach, he rushed towards Yujiro. Yujiro was knocked back dozens of meters before stopping with strong leg power, but Baki didn't stop his attack. With a kick as fast as lightning, he drove Yujiro into the wall, and without giving Yujiro any chance to react, Baki kicked out twice more. The tremendous impact sent Yujiro flying into the next room's bathroom. Simultaneously, Baki seized the opportunity to launch another fierce attack on Yujiro, but unexpectedly, Yujiro stood still, easily seeing through Baki's technique with a single move. Yujiro, with concern, asked Baki, "Who taught you this technique? It's so weak." Before he finished speaking, his body twisted 180 degrees, reversing and throwing Baki out. Eventually, the hotel's outer wall was also broken. Yujiro wanted to enjoy the sight of Baki falling, but he was left dumbfounded. On the other side, Baki, falling from the high-rise, used his hands as buffers to control his form and landed perfectly. Suddenly, Baki felt a huge impact and turned his head to see a massive crowd. Where did all these people come from? He wondered. And this all began with the legend of the strongest father and son. In an underground fighting arena that gathered all the outstanding fighters, a 17-year-old boy barehandedly defeated all challengers and won the final championship. Yet, he had one person he deeply feared, his father, suppressing weapons, destroying arms, a man who played with national power in his hands. He was Yujiro. However, facing thousands of people, Yujiro backed down. Frightened, especially as the news was still reporting the father-son fight, countless people rushed to the scene, pulling out their phones to post on social media. This operation made Yujiro break out in a cold sweat. Though he was used to fighting in front of people, this atmosphere was too much for him. It was like being made a monkey. So, Yujiro jumped off the building, found Baki, and told him he wasn't fighting today. However, Baki flatly refused and mocked his father, Yujiro, for being afraid of losing face in public. At this, Yujiro instantly exploded in anger. While his mind was still reeling, Baki made his move. A punch hit Yujiro right on the chin, followed by 2 roundhouse kicks. Then he quickly retreated. The crowd was stunned. Is this really human speed? All they could see in their eyes was the dust that hadn't yet settled from the actions. Here is the translation, breaking down the intense dynamics between Baki and Yujiro. Yujiro, facing his son Baki's provocation, couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. His hair stood on end. Baki, can you handle my counterattack? Clearly aiming for Yujiro's vitals, yet he seemed unfazed, not even flinching. Could it be that he's letting me hit him on purpose? But Baki didn't have much time to think. Now, his only option was to go all out. Imagining his consciousness turning into water, Baki then surged forward with another cockroach sprint towards Yujiro. However, Yujiro stood still, unmoving. Do you think the same technique will work on me twice? Yujiro asked. After speaking, Yujiro raised his hand and smacked Baki's face with a slap, the loud sound making the audience cover their ears. Baki was sent flying, landing among the onlookers and knocking down a swath of the crowd. Indeed, not everyone is cut out to watch the excitement. Yujiro stepped closer, causing the crowd to flee in terror, leaving Baki alone in the square. Baki leaped up, attempting to counterattack, but was met with Yujiro's merciless claw. He was grasped firmly, like a little chick. Then, Yujiro slammed Baki hard into the ground, causing him to cry out in pain. This scream made the onlookers wonder, isn't Baki his real son? Yet, like an indestructible cockroach, Baki kept getting up and fighting back, only to be knocked down time and again. Baki, nearing madness, finally realized this was no longer just a father-son battle, but a fight. Slowly getting up and wiping the blood from his nose, a huge cheer erupted from the square. Indeed, fighting spirit is the most potent stimulant and painkiller on the field. Baki, with excitement on his face, looked at his father Yujiro. Come on, let's fight. Baki launched the first attack with a kick aimed at Yujiro's vitals, but unfortunately, Yujiro was unfazed, easily deflecting Baki's attack with a punch. Baki turned and kicked again, only to have it dodged. Then he continued his onslaught, but each move was effortlessly blocked by Yujiro. He was too fast. The onlookers still couldn't see anything. Only Dappo, watching, smiled slightly, happy for Baki. That's great, Baki. Go and have fun. After all, only your father can play with you like this. Baki's attacks were fierce, but to Yujiro, they were just child's play. Just then, Baki suddenly stopped his attack and returned to his original position, looking up at the sky in surprise. And there, on the high building, was the long-lost primitive man, Pickle. The next second, Baki stretched out his fists and kicked back. It was the Triceratops form fist Baki had created, a move that even stunned Yujiro. Yujiro had not expected Baki to have this move. As Baki's figure became more blurred, the giant dinosaur shadow became more real. Yujiro, excited, immediately got ready to face the battle. Prehistoric dinosaurs were the idols of Yujiro's youth. As the strongest being on Earth, Yujiro had always wanted to know just how formidable a prehistoric dinosaur was. The Triceratops charged instantly, and Yujiro stretched out both hands to resist the impact of the horns. As Baki's force increased, Yujiro was forced to retreat step by step, finally flipping over a small car to stop. Looking at Baki's powerful destructive force, Yujiro showed a satisfied smile. "You're really something, kid, to burst out with such terrifying power from less than 70 kilograms of body weight. You must have gained that most primal strength," Yujiro commented, as the father-son battle heated up. Pickle, far away and 100 meters away, finally moved. He stood up excitedly. Was Pickle preparing to join the fight? Meanwhile, the duel between the two continued. Baki's dinosaur fist was indeed astounding, but to Yujiro, whether it was tiger fist or dinosaur fist, they were just imitations in form. "Today, Baki, I'll show you what the ultimate essence of imitative fist really looks like," Yujiro declared. The next second, Yujiro raised his hands above his head. The oppressive atmosphere suddenly surged, and his terrifying muscular strength directly burst his clothes. Then, with Yujiro at the center, shockwaves spread out, accompanied by dazzling golden light that caused temporary blindness in everyone, including Baki. And this move made Baki realize his father's strategy. The essence of imitative fist is to mimic the fighting style of the strong, and Yujiro believes he is the strongest person in the world. At that moment, Yujiro turned and swung a punch at the void. The huge impact force made Baki unable to open his eyes. Then, Yujiro delivered a roundhouse kick towards the void, each move creating invisible pressure waves spreading out. At the same time, Baki had to admit, as he said, there is no imitation technique more perfect than directly mimicking oneself. While Baki was still immersed in Yujiro's teachings, the next second, an astonishing scene occurred. Just as Baki raised his hand, Yujiro plunged forward. Fortunately, a split prevented Yujiro from falling. Seeing this, the onlookers jumped in fright. What happened? Yujiro had actually fallen. Only Dappo saw that this move was not simple. From sending the signal in the brain to initiating the action, it takes at least 0.5 seconds, a buffer that most people can neither perceive nor break. But Baki did it, to reach such a level at such a young age. Remember, he is only 18 years old. Yujiro, with excitement in his voice, said, "Baki, you really are a great toy." Hearing his father's praise, Baki couldn't help but show a smug smile. Suddenly, Yujiro stretched out his hand and said, "Come here, Baki. Let me pat your head." At this, Baki was completely baffled, even doubting his own ears. The next second, Baki, with his face red with anger, roared, "This is supposed to be a fight." However, Yujiro casually responded, "Isn't it a father's right to praise his own son?" Hearing this, Baki couldn't help but feel a twinge of emotion. Even tears started flowing from his eyes. That simple act of paternal praise was exactly what he had missed in the past 18 years. Seeing his father's gesture to pat him, Baki admitted he couldn't resist. Suddenly, Baki dodged, creating some distance between him and Yujiro. Although Baki longed to feel his father's affection, this was not the time, because this was a battle to decide who was truly the strongest on Earth. He could not allow himself to show any weakness. However, Yujiro saw this as a rare opportunity to experience the essence of true strength. Before Baki could understand what that meant, Yujiro instantly appeared behind him and clamped down on him. Baki, despite using all his strength, could not move at all. Yujiro asked, "Do you now understand what being the strongest means?" Baki immediately tried a roundhouse kick to break free, but in the face of absolute power, all techniques were futile. Now, without saying anything, Yujiro had already engraved the essence of strength into the young man's heart. No matter how furiously Baki counterattacked, he could not escape his father's grasp. This absurd maneuver was almost unbearable to watch, a clear sign that Yujiro was a sadist at heart. Yujiro then said, "You really want to be praised, don't you?" Baki instantly erupted in rage and kicked at Yujiro with terrifying force, hitting him so hard that blood sprayed violently. The next second, Yujiro wiped the blood away and then licked it from his hand. Yujiro told Baki, "If you want to fight, fight without being restrained by any conditions." Suddenly, Yujiro exerted force, and Baki spun rapidly like a top. One has to admit, Yujiro really is a good father. Mere words weren't enough. He had to demonstrate it personally, because, in Yujiro's view, all that talk of restraint and patience is just an illusion created by losers. Baki tried his best to steady his mind and body, but the next second, Yujiro covered Baki's abdomen with a punch, sending him flying dozens of meters away. Yujiro asked, "Do you understand now? The essence of strength is neither good nor evil. Remember, the truly strong have no need for patience." With that, Yujiro kicked Baki into the air. Then he teleported forward and delivered another punch to Baki's abdomen. At this moment, Baki fully understood his father's will, but he never imagined that Yujiro's strength was innate. To defeat him, there was only one possibility. He must also be of the Hama bloodline, and the purity of that bloodline must be very high. Watching Baki struggling on the ground, Yujiro sighed. I just praised you, and yet you're so useless. We've played around for quite a while. It's time to end this battle. But just then, Baki and Yujiro suddenly felt a powerful presence approaching. Turning their heads, they saw the primitive man, Pickle, appearing out of nowhere, even wearing a cheeky expression as if to say, "Long time no see." In an instant, Yujiro's face was filled with excitement. What an interesting night. At the same time, Baki also got up in surprise. What will happen when the two strongest males from ancient and modern times collide? Suddenly, Baki leaped up and threw a punch directly at Pickle's face, breaking his armor-biting teeth. Watching Pickle's broken teeth, his face showed a murderous look, as if he wanted to bite Baki in half. But before he could act, he was subdued by the aura of rage emanating from Baki. Clearly, Pickle's sudden interference greatly displeased Baki. In the natural world, there's an unwritten rule: during a duel between two, a third party must absolutely not interfere. With this in mind, Pickle had no choice but to sit among the crowd, waiting for the outcome of the father-son battle. Baki said with a smile, "You see, father," and Yujiro replied indifferently, "It doesn't matter. If it weren't for Pickle's appearance, this great battle might have already ended." As soon as the words fell, Yujiro perfectly replicated Baki's 0.5-second special move, and Baki, struck hard, went white in the eyes and collapsed on the ground. All this was because Yujiro had already anticipated Baki's moves. He had countered before the opponent even attacked, and Yujiro felt annoyed. Why not just kill him now? This tedious fight had exhausted his limited patience, so he wanted to end the battle with a quick move. But suddenly, Baki disappeared on the spot, and the arena was filled with thick smoke due to the massive impact. When the dust finally settled, Baki walked out with his hands in his pockets, revealing that it was all a ruse. Then Baki suggested deciding the outcome with a quick draw competition, which Yujiro was of course happy to oblige. Just like ancient swordsmen, like cowboy gunmen, let's decide the winner in 0.5 seconds. The next second, father and son both stared each other down with their hands in their pockets. The suffocating pressure made even Baki break out in a cold sweat. But unexpectedly, both father and son were more hesitant than the other, and Yujiro immediately suggested a new game. The rules were simple. He would personally count down from 5, and when his palm turned into a fist, Yujiro would launch his attack. Facing such blatant humiliation, Baki immediately objected, but Yujiro ignored him and started counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The countdown ended. Yujiro's hand turned into a fist. That was the moment Baki made his move. And the so-called 0.5-second quick draw wasn't about pulling hands out of pockets. It was about making the hands automatically leave the body through a method of moving without moving. Baki drew his fists at lightning speed, but before he could strike, Yujiro's iron fist was already in front of him, with a mocking expression on his face, as if telling Baki, "Your dad will always be your dad." The next second, Baki's face was twisted and deformed by the punch, but suddenly he turned and delivered the biggest gift of the night to Yujiro. In the moment he was hit, Baki put all his strength into a left foot kick to Yujiro's face and hooked his right foot around his neck, giving no time to react. He then used both hands to force Yujiro down on the ground. This move was from the ancient secret manual, named Tiger King Fast Fist. Seeing this scene, the onlookers were completely stunned. The huge advantage had been reversed in an instant. The audience, witnessing all this, trembled with anger, but had to admit that Baki was really strong. Even Dappo couldn't help but criticize Yujiro for being too careless. Feeling his father's head and sturdy arms, Baki truly sensed that Yujiro was under him. With a sneer, Baki couldn't help but mock. Just when Baki thought he had the upper hand, little did he know his actions had completely ignited Yujiro's rage. Yujiro made no response, but this wasn't the result Baki wanted. Suddenly, Yujiro moved his hand. Making an okay gesture, Yujiro stretched his right hand behind him, twisting it 180 degrees. Suddenly, Yujiro turned his palm into a fist and smashed it into the ground. Instantly, a loud bang echoed, and a massive shockwave exploded from the center, forming huge cracks in the ground that spread outwards. Yujiro's right hand was buried deep into the ground, and the next second, he spun his whole body, unleashing his right hand to burst through the soil. Transforming into an iron fist, he viciously struck Baki's abdomen. The terrifying force sent Baki flying 10 meters away. Yujiro's desperate counterattack once again defended his title as the strongest creature on Earth. Normal people simply cannot move freely under the asphalt. And even Dappo had to admit that no one but Yujiro Hama can do this. Baki, enduring the intense pain, slowly got up. It was unbelievable that Yujiro's ground-punching fist made Baki wet himself. Seeing Baki with tears in his eyes, Yujiro only wanted to mock him, other than crying, "You're just a worthless liar." In response, Baki didn't argue but suddenly burst out with a roundhouse kick towards Yujiro. However, just as he was about to land the kick, Yujiro moved too. He also launched a roundhouse kick to counter, and after a fierce collision, Baki was sent flying, although still not a match for his father, compared to 5 years ago when he was nearly beaten to death. Today's Baki already has the ability to compete with Yujiro. The carefully nurtured seed finally bore fruit, filling Yujiro's face with excitement. He then slowly raised his hands, and a devilish face appeared on Yujiro's back. The next second, a punch filled with the power of the demon back burst forth. The terrible force inside it made even Baki wonder if he could catch it. In the moment he hesitated, the fierce punch wind had already made contact with Baki's body, sending him flying like a cannonball before crashing heavily onto a van. Yujiro's full-strength blow nearly knocked out all of Baki's consciousness. Little did he know this was just the beginning. Yujiro quickly moved toward Baki and launched a series of crazy strikes at his abdomen, the immense power making Baki feel worse than dead. At this moment, Baki finally understood how terrifying Yujiro, who could dominate over nations, truly was. But just then, Baki, on the brink of death, suddenly entered a strange state. Suddenly, Yujiro also felt a terrifying power. The oppressive feeling even made his hair stand on end. Seeing this, Baki turned his head and saw a powerful shadow that had appeared out of nowhere, and he was Yujiro Hama's father. The onlookers, sweating cold sweat, had not expected the legend to be true. The man who dominated America before Yujiro was Yuichiro Hama. During the Battle of Okinawa, the United States deployed dozens of warships and hundreds of aircraft, even using over 1,000 tons of ammunition, and their target was just one man, Yuichiro Hama. But whether warships or ammunition, none had any effect on Yuichiro. The commander could only request the use of atomic bombs, but before it could be executed, the commander's head was brutally slammed into the deck. Over 2,000 sailors were terrified. The strength required to stab a person into the deck, which could withstand bomb blasts, had to be terrifying. Just then, the man appeared and used an incredible technique. In just a few minutes, over 2,000 crew members abandoned the ship, jumping into the sea to escape. And this is the legend of Yuichiro Hama. But who would have thought that Yuichiro's appearance was just to encourage Baki not to give up? And then his figure disappeared on the spot. Even Yuichiro's technique was something even Yujiro had to admire. Yujiro suddenly moved, tripping Baki and sending his body airborne. Baki used the momentum to attempt a flying kick but was easily neutralized by Yujiro. Then he grabbed his son's ankle and demonstrated Yuichiro's technique to Baki. Baki was hit so hard that blood gushed from his nose, and Yujiro suddenly increased his hand speed. The super high-speed impact caused Baki's brain to severely congest. Even the 7 orifices became blood outlets, and even his consciousness began to blur. Yujiro's human nunchaku radiated massive wind pressure, causing the area within 100 miles to instantly become a no-man's land. Yet Yujiro did not stop there, as the number of swings increased. Eventually, the high-speed spinning shadows that formed around Baki created a semi-transparent coat on Yujiro. Just when everyone thought it was all over, little did they know the ultimate technique had just begun. Encouraging Baki very kindly, "You have the blood of the Hanma. You must take good care of your body. Don't die." Suddenly, Yujiro moved, using Baki as a weapon to smash him directly into the van. With a thunderous bang, the entire building shook. But this wasn't the end. Yujiro swung Baki again, striking the van with the highest speed and force. With each attack, Yujiro's power grew exponentially, because Yujiro knew Baki was not as simple as he seemed. On the other side, Dappo was extremely envious, wishing he had a son to play with like this. Baki did not disappoint Yujiro's trust. Amidst Yujiro's relentless whipping, Baki found his consciousness getting clearer and figured out how to respond, dodging all sharp and pointed parts where possible, and if he couldn't dodge, he used techniques to preemptively break them. Facing this ordeal, Baki not only recovered his physical strength but also made a gift for his father. Yujiro opened his palm to look and was stunned. It was a toy part. It turned out that with every collision with a car, Baki had been taking apart and assembling it. The next second, Baki suddenly launched an attack, and he had grown stronger, but Yujiro was also completely enraged by Baki. No matter how fast the attack, in front of Baki, it seemed like slow motion and was instantly neutralized. Thinking back on his life, Yujiro, beaten severely by Baki, pondered how being invincible was so lonely. Baki once again extended his hand to challenge his father. "Come on, let's continue the fight." Yujiro leapt up for a shrimp kick, but Baki easily dodged and perfectly replicated his father's attack, hitting Yujiro in the face. Watching his father kick to the ground, Baki evolved. He could clearly feel that the foreigner had completed his evolution. Yujiro leapt easily to Baki's front, truly the strongest man on Earth. Enduring such a brutal beating yet still unharmed, the battle between the two ignited again. This time under the name of Hanma, Baki imagined his whole body turning into liquid. With a push from his legs, the great force turned into a wind that acted as Baki's jet. Appearing right in front of Yujiro, the massive shockwave radiated across the field, and Yujiro's face was full of excitement. What a nice punch! Considering Yujiro had traveled the world's corners and hadn't found a satisfying toy. But who would have thought the best toy would be Baki? But what ultimately happens to toys? Perhaps only death. As the father-son battle heated up, Koju suddenly appeared and launched into the father and son. "Are you playing games? So boring to watch you fight." Unexpectedly, Baki didn't argue, admitting they were indeed playing a game, but they were also deciding the outcome. After all, every move Baki made was a lethal technique not usable on ordinary people, and Yujiro's techniques were comparable to modern weapons. So, this was a death game only the Hanma father and son could play. Suddenly, Yujiro's reverse hand chop was easily dodged by Baki, and then Yujiro's heavy punch was caught between Baki's two fingers. The next second, Yujiro was flipped into the air, and Baki's action stunned everyone. On the other side, the off-balance Yujiro continued to attack, cleverly using his waist power to deliver a reverse hook that deeply embedded Baki's feet into the ground. For both Baki and Yujiro, they were unique to each other. The battle they unfolded was an unprecedented non-human domain, also intoxicating the onlookers. At that moment, Yujiro's direct kick sent Baki flying several meters. Yujiro instantly appeared behind Koju, bowing in thanks, because Baki's transformation had something to do with her. But the battle wasn't over, yet the father and son left Koju behind. Before Koju could speak, the two battle maniacs were already fighting in front of her. At this moment, whether father, son, or lover, they all deeply felt that the end was approaching. In front of tens of thousands, Yujiro and Baki fully unleashed their wild nature, abandoning all defense. Every punch, every kick, was a full-force clash. This hours-long battle, the strongest father-son battle on Earth, also let everyone understand that the conflict between father and son was not disharmony but mutual integration. Baki found an opportunity to get on Yujiro's neck, but his father didn't mind and instead started walking step by step. In this battle, Yujiro not only passed on all his martial arts but also gave Baki such treatment, letting him settle all regrets. So, it was time to decide the outcome. Yujiro slowly put his son down, and Baki took the opportunity to deliver a fierce back throw, but Yujiro was unharmed. Then, he flipped up into the air and instantly displayed a move that spanned all creation. In an instant, Baki was blinded in both ears, reminding him of his mother, who was killed by the same technique. Far across the earth in a pyramid, archaeologists discovered a mural. The mural depicted two demons, large and small, in battle, followed by tens of thousands of followers, and this seemed like a cyclic fate. Thousands of years later, the father-son battle was reenacted. Yujiro's move pierced Baki's eardrums and didn't care whether his son could hear as he twisted his fingers one by one into fists. He then started to recall the first martial arts lesson he gave to Baki. The strongest father-son battle on Earth finally entered its final phase. Baki, mimicking Yujiro, adopted a fighting stance, completely forgetting defense, focusing all his mental energy on how to punch. At this moment, father and son erupted with unprecedented terrifying power, rushing towards each other, delivering the strongest punch carrying all their strength. Yes, this was what they wanted, a pure contest of strength. The most unimaginable thing was the sound of fists colliding with faces, the strongest sonic boom they created that night. But the battle wasn't over. Yujiro and Baki steadied themselves and launched another attack. completely abandoning defense and exposing their weaknesses to danger. This could no longer be called martial arts or fighting, but rather the strongest battle between two men. Suddenly, someone squeezed into the crowd and came to the forefront of the battlefield, with tears in their eyes shouting Yujiro's name before kneeling in worship. And slowly, more and more people did the same, a scene eerily like the pyramid mural. These were the weaker masses. To the country, Yujiro was a devil. But to them, he was a godlike figure. Where there are oppressed people, there will be bullying thugs. And Yujiro, caring neither for evil nor justice, eradicated all thugs with his strength. Even the mightiest United States bowed down, neither yielding a step. The energy circle created by the father and son grew smaller and smaller. Everyone knew this battle was nearing its climactic moment. Nearly everyone's gaze was fixed intently on the battlefield, fearing they might miss even a moment. At that moment, Jack was kneeling in front of the TV, crying uncontrollably. With medicine scattered all around him, he shouted, "Dad, I can do it too!" On the other side, Yujiro stopped his attack, facing Baki's storm-like assault. He did not counterattack. Instead, he opened his palms and spread his arms, standing quietly there to welcome his son's punches. What was he doing? Showing off his endurance, or perhaps waiting to embrace Baki? What was going all out? But everything has its end. Yujiro suddenly closed his hands, locking Baki tightly in his embrace, then suddenly exerted his strength. Baki screamed, accompanied by the sound of his bones breaking. Baki's pupils dilated, and his body had lost all sensation. He collapsed to the ground like a dead body, no longer capable of fighting. And this, like 5 years ago, was the move with which Yujiro had completely ended Baki's mother. Seeing Baki with fractures all over his body, Yujiro finally stopped. He felt everything should be about finished. To continue would no longer be a fight. After all, he wasn't a person of extreme cruelty. Yujiro turned to leave, and all the onlookers subconsciously made way, even continuously bowing to thank Yujiro for the spectacular fight he brought tonight. But just then, Yujiro suddenly felt a tension from behind. Baki had actually stood up. Yujiro turned to look at Baki. "You little rascal, not playing fair. Ha! Planning a sneak attack?" Baki was clearly lying on the ground, unable to move. How could he launch an attack? It turned out that Baki used his ghost brain to simulate himself and launched a flying kick at Yujiro. At that moment, a wisp of white smoke emerged from Baki's brain and condensed into Baki's figure, launching another attack on Yujiro. This was Baki's indomitable fighting spirit. Suddenly, Yujiro seemed to understand something and stopped Baki, then started cooking on his own. But Yujiro had no food in his hands. However, the onlookers could clearly feel that Yujiro was indeed cooking, chopping tofu, cutting green onions, mixing a delicious tofu miso soup was thus prepared. Baki slowly got up. An unprecedented air dinner began. Having a meal cooked by his father was Baki's long-cherished wish. He picked up the chopsticks, ready to start, but Yujiro suddenly changed his expression. "I've told you before, you're holding the chopsticks wrong." But Baki didn't care. This isn't a fancy restaurant. Who cares about so many rules? Saying so, he downed the miso soup in one go. Tastes good, just a bit salty. Yujiro didn't believe it. After all, the imagined thing didn't even have the taste of water. Who knew? Baki suddenly flipped the table, nearly making Yujiro explode, then immediately moved to catch the bowl and chopsticks. But the moment he caught them, all the imaginary items disappeared. Just when Yujiro was distracted, Baki said, "Father, you kept your pride." "Ha!" Seeing Baki's determined eyes, Yujiro smiled slightly. Yes, the soup was a bit salty. Because he didn't want to admit it, he found an excuse. It turns out Baki noticed Yujiro's wavering and flipped the table to save his face. Yujiro once told Baki, "The smallest unit of strength is the power to do as one pleases." And now, Baki not only made the strongest on earth cook, but also forced him to lie for the sake of saving face. Nothing could be more arbitrary than this. So, accept the title of the strongest on earth right here. As soon as he said this, the entire crowd was stunned. Yujiro actually admitted Baki was the strongest. Everyone witnessed the scene, but Baki, because of his punctured eardrums, didn't hear it. Baki slowly stood up and said, "Looking down at your opponent from a higher position is the victor, but just now, Father did that, so I lost." The strongest's declaration of defeat once again caused a stir in the crowd. Whether it was the father who handed over the title of the strongest or the son who ceded victory, the outcome was decided, and both had given their all. This father-son battle finally reached its conclusion.